I note the fact that we still have 2 absentees at the moment. I've had word from Councillor Ralston that she's en route, but I haven't had anything from Councillor Pole at the moment. We will commence the meeting though, please. Before we start, a little housekeeping. Can I please remind you all that your mobile phone should be on silent or turned off. We have no fire alarms planned, so in the event of an alarm sounding, please make your way out of the room and follow a member of staff to the safe evacuation point, which is on Southern Hay Green, just round behind the building at the Blitz Tree. After we're meeting, please remain focused on the topic that we are discussing. Questions should be direct and specific to the item of business being discussed. Please avoid repeating points which have already been made. I would ask you to please respect the other members of this committee and the position of the chair. Finally, can I remind you that if you're leaving the meeting during consideration of any item, you will be unable to take part in the vote. So when we come to the various natural breaks, if you require a physical needs break, please indicate to me and we will take a short adjournment. Okay, so let us start on our agenda. We have apologies. I have received an apology from Councillor Hughes. They are unfortunately unwell. I have not had any intimations from the others, so we will hope that they will arrive before we start our main item of business. Councillor Mitchell.
Whilst we wait for those, we could proceed with the other items except for 5 and 6, which don't require.
Right. Okay. We'll
do that, and then that time goes.
Okay. So we'll move through. Everybody content with that? Yes. Right. Okay. So because obviously it's much better to have the numbers here than there. So the minutes of the previous meeting on the 8th of September. You have those, and hopefully you've read them through. Does anybody have any comments on those minutes? Doesn't see anybody. Okay, in that case, I will sign those at the appropriate time that we can and get those into the record. Declarations of interest. So councillors are reminded of the need to declare any disclosable pecuniary interests that relate to business on the agenda, which have not already been included in the register of interests. Please do so before we actually start the discussion. I have received no intimation from anybody that there is any such matter of interest, pecuniary interest, so we shall assume not. And finally, the exclusion of press and public. I see no reason for any of the items this evening to move into part 2, and therefore do not expect to move that recommendation. As we have said, we want to make sure that both councillors Ralston and Pole are able to take part in the meeting, so we are moving past items 5 and 6 just for the moment, and we're going on to item 7, which is a list of decisions made and withdrawn applications. You again have had an opportunity to look through those. I see Councillor Mitchell, you wish to raise a point. Could you give us the page number, please, Councillor Mitchell? Could you use your microphone?
Page 142, the application at the top of the page, the address is not relevant. It's just a change of use from a C3 to a C4, which was not lawful use as a decision. My understanding was, and perhaps I'm wrong on this, that changes of use from to C3 to C4 were permitted developments. I'm just wondering, and as it's a small HMO, it's not a matter of the licensing scheme. So I'm just wondering what might be the situation here, as we often in our ward get numerous HMOs. Just was any clarification on what that meant.
Yeah, thanks for the question, Councillor. It's not an application I'm familiar with, so I need to look at the delegated report and see the circumstances of that case and respond to you later, if that's okay.
We're just thinking it might be an Article 4 relationship, but also in that immediate area are already numerous HMOs.
Any other matters arising from the list of decisions made and withdrawn applications? No. Okay, we'll then move to item 8, which is the appeals report. Again, you've had an opportunity to look through those. Are there any questions about the appeals report? Say again, Councillor Mitchell, please.
Again, it's just a technical, but this, because clearly this is written for an online document with hyperlinks, etc. But on 2 of the applications, on page 17302, it says planning officer summary, and if on page 172304, the same phraseology, because it would be helpful to members and members of the public, I think, if it actually indicated before people went online what the decision was. All the others that have extensive writing say appeal dismissed or whatever, but on those 2, you'd have to go online to find out the result. And I just think it would be helpful if just that appeal decision was there, just so that people know. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. That has been noted by the director. Thank you. Right, thank you. We now have, oh, sorry, Councillor Atkinson.
I just wanted to say before you go, can I just go to the loo? So you don't
We will
start
just have a couple of minutes break. Please. All right, we are on item number 5 on the agenda. This is the planning application 250098 FUL and 250099 LBC, the former Old Garden adjacent to Reed, Mews, Marden Hill, Exeter. Right, let me get my little sheet. Right. Okay, so we're starting off with public speaking, and I have no councillor speaking under Standing Order 44. I have no speaker objecting. I do have a supporter, and that is Mr. Mike Shaw-Nye, the Senior Vice President and Registrar and Secretary, Exeter University. Mr. Shaw-Nye, could you please approach the committee? Welcome, sir. You have 5 minutes to address the committee, and we would like to ask you questions after your presentation. You may start whenever you're comfortable. And are you acquainted with the microphone system here? Right. Okay. In front of you, there are 2 buttons. The one on the right. If you press the button on the right, then the red light will shine, and you are being recorded.
Thank you, and thank you, Joe. Good evening, members. So the proposal before you today is the culmination of over 2 years of extensive collaboration with the council. We've worked tirelessly with your counterparts in the development team throughout the determination process to address design, landscape and heritage matters, and have risen to the challenges of your officers throughout, which have positively shaped the proposed development. The result, we think, is a flagship development for both the university and the City of Exeter, delivering an outstanding cross-faculty research and teaching facility that will support and enhance the existing world-leading Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies. The proposed building will accommodate 80 academics and 400 students, meeting the identified need for large, active and digitally connected learning spaces and for collaborative research space. In developing the design, we've engaged with the Council's appointed design review panel twice, and maintained pre-application dialogue with officers throughout. We have listened and we have responded at each stage. As a result, since the submission of the application, the building has been reduced in height, decreased in size by some 19%. The landscaping enhancements have increased across the site, and the architecture and materiality comprehensively revisited to more successfully integrate the building into its surroundings. The use of the historic muse during the construction phase has also been removed from the proposals as requested by officers. The sensitivities and complexity of developing within this historic campus setting has been a primary consideration throughout the project. The design is a direct response to the challenges of balancing heritage impacts and the functional requirements of the much needed new educational facility in this location. As recognised by officers, the proposals will inevitably result in some heritage harm through the loss of historic fabric on site, but that this harm will be less than substantial in the terms of the National Planning Policy Framework. However, it is agreed that the public benefits that will be delivered and secured by the development will outweigh this harm, and these benefits are considered significant and multifaceted. In economic terms, the proposed facility will continue to support the university's £509.4 million contribution to Exeter's GDP and the support we provide for some 9,750 jobs. The additional floor space is estimated to facilitate an increase in international and domestic postgraduate teaching annualised income of around 6.7 million and research income of 2 million. The facility will also continue to attract international students to the city. The construction phase will provide additional fixed-term social and economic benefits to the local economy, estimated to be in the region of 74.5 to 8 million over the anticipated 2-year construction period. In physical terms, the development will enhance campus connectivity by providing a new fully inclusive and accessible path through the Reed Hall Gardens. This will facilitate inclusive access to previously restricted areas of the campus for students and visitors, and will also support student movement to and from the new West Park residences. As listed in the officer report, the proposals will also secure a commitment by condition to deliver a wider package of restoration and enhancement measures, which will help to better reveal the significance of Reed Hall and its associated gardens. These enhancements will be further supported by the creation of views and a user experience in the part of the campus from the newly created garden areas and the elevated cafe terraces, allowing greater appreciation of the historic setting of Reed Hall and its former gardens. In sustainability terms, the building will use low embodied carbon materials and off-site construction methods where feasible, and will also adopt passive house standards, ensuring the building will be delivered in the most sustainable manner possible. The proposals will also meet the required biodiversity net gain objectives through the provision of on-site and off-site measures, with the impact on the existing bat roost in the workshop buildings already mitigated by the construction of a separate standalone bat house. With regards to consultation, all matter raised by statutory consultees have been successfully addressed either through the revised design or through the use of planning conditions. There have been no public representations made through either consultation process. So in closing, the proposals would deliver a world-class academic building required to support the ongoing growth and role of the university that will help celebrate this historic and evolving part of our Streatham campus. The new building will be an exemplar of high quality and sustainable architecture, demonstrating the university's commitment to low carbon development and sustainable development goals. The proposals reinforce the University of Exeter's role as a civic institution serving the city, the region and wider society, and we believe justifies planning consent on the grounds of significant long-term public value that will be secured. We welcome the Council's clear acknowledgement of the importance of this project and kindly request that the committee supports the officer recommendation to grant planning permission for the application this evening to avoid critical delays to the delivery of this flagship facility. Thank you.
Now invite members of the committee to ask you questions. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you. In the officer's report, the urban design and landscape officer points to the master plan, which is now running its end. It's coming 2025. It's about to be revised, saying it does not anticipate major development in this area, instead envisioning only smaller sensitive interventions. And reading the report, there seems to be this clash between the heritage value of Reed Hall, etc., and the conflict with the modern building next to it, height, massing and design. So could I ask, in your discussions with the council, had you considered any other options of sites within the campus other than this one, which appears to be slightly more sensitive than other places potentially, and why this site?
The answer is complex, and there's multiple elements to it. I think firstly, we see this as a a kind of key enabler of activity that's already within the Institute of Arab and Islamic Studies. Is one of our most successful and kind of world-leading research areas. And there's significant demand for programs associated with this activity, so it does make a logical sense to be there. We also think it will actually boost the use of this part of the campus and to encourage people to enjoy it more. We know that the building will be a real core, particularly for academic conferences, and those will be supported by the use of Reed Hall, which at the moment is primarily used for meetings and events, both for people across the city, but also particularly within the institution. When we look across campus, there are a variety of development opportunities, but none of them really would be as logical as this one, and we don't think would benefit from its location. So we did go through a long period of considerations when we were originally thinking about this development, but that's really what's driving its focus.
Any other questions from members? I have one for you, sir. You talked about the biodiversity net gain and the fact that there's on-site and off-site. Where did you envisage the off-site being, and what sort of things would be involved?
I might need to get some help with that question, if that's okay. Is that all right?
Okay. My concern is that it's just literally going to be buying a forest in Scotland rather than actually focusing on a net gain either here in Exeter or at least in the immediate area.
No, we as an institution, we have moved away from any use of offsetting as an approach to managing carbon. So you may have seen recent investments in and around the Hoopin Valley to try and create that as a space to increase biodiversity and encourage members of the community to engage with it. Certainly the planting and the kind of landscaping which will be in and around this building, will be significant. We're really proud of our grounds. As you know, we've got a significant grounds team and also a pretty significant environmental sustainability team who are focusing in on that. We do have a biodiversity strategy, and that covers everything from kind of the way in which the grounds are managed, but also everything from the kind of chemicals that are used on site and also the development of diverse environments around it. So it's very much focused on the use of our campuses and its environments rather than doing something in Scotland.
Thank you very much indeed. Can I ask, are there any other questions from committee members, please? No, I'm not seeing any questions. So, Mr. Shawnai, thank you very much indeed for your time. And if you take a seat, we'll continue with our debate. Right, our next stage is for the officer report and the recommendation. And over to you, John.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you. Good evening, everyone. Yeah, this is actually two applications before you today. It's a planning application and a related application for listed building consent. So two applications made together as one report. Before I start the presentation, I just wanted to draw your attention to the amendment sheet, which you will already have seen. As you'll see when I get to the end, the recommendation that's written in the presentation and then in the report is a recommendation for approval. Just in response to the two issues raised on the amendment sheet, I just wanted to give a brief update about those now. And essentially, the two issues are a consultation response from the airport, in which the airport requests two additional pre-commencement conditions to be added. I wanted to confirm that I've spoken to the university and the agent today, and they have agreed those pre-commencement conditions. That's important because we need to secure agreement for pre-commencement conditions before we attach them. So that has been agreed. The other item on the amendment sheet was a request for a number of minor changes to the planning conditions, and I've also discussed those with the university today. We didn't have time, unfortunately, to lay out our suggested response to that in the form of a set of minor revisions to those conditions, but we have agreed, very minor changes which satisfied both parties. So what I wanted to ask is that the recommendation is updated just to request that it's a recommendation for approval for both applications, but it's subject to delegation to officers to make those minor changes to those those conditions in respect of the issues raised by the university in their queries in the amendment sheet. So hope that's helpful. So starting with the site itself, you're probably all familiar with the campus. This is sort of central west in the university campus, adjacent to Reed Hall. The red line here is the application site. It's important to note that the size of the application site has been reduced during the application. So the red line was previously larger in this area here, and I will explain that a little bit later on as I move through the application. The blue hatching on here obviously shows that this is all adjacent land, is all in the control of the university. So it is a historic site, as I'll explain, and it's quite a complex site. So I'm going to start by explaining the buildings and the landscape before I move into some photographs to explain that site to you. So I wasn't sure whether the pointer would work, but it is. But to avoid that, I put some numbers on the plan here. So number 1 shows the application site itself in this area here. Number 2 is the grade 2 listed Reed Hall, which dates from around 1867 when it replaced an earlier house called Duryard Lodge, and it was previously known as Streatham Hall. And as the speaker just mentioned, this provides catering and conferencing facilities for the university now. Numbers 3 and 4 here are in the areas of historic terraces and steps, which were laid out as part of the ornamental Italianate gardens to the building by the Veitch family at the same time as the building was constructed. Number 5 is a courtyard which serves the catering facilities for Reed Hall. Number 6 here, which I'll refer to later, is another courtyard, which I will refer to as the Mews courtyard. These 2 buildings here that surround it were former stabling buildings or Mews buildings, also dating back to the original construction of the building. Number 7 to the north of the site is one of a number of buildings to the north which are in use as student accommodation. Holland Hall is also a little bit further north. Number 8 here is currently a tennis court, but this is part of what's known as the West Park development. So this is where the West Park development of additional replacement student housing comes closest to the site, and that's a development that's currently underway. Number 9 is, as you've already heard, the Institute of Arabic and Islamic Studies, which this new building would be very closely associated with. And number 10 is a former productive garden through which a new footpath is proposed. This orange line that I've marked on, I'll talk about in a moment. This indicates where there would have been a 4th wall historically to this historic garden. And previously, this would have been a different character to the land around it, but over time, as that wall's disappeared, this sort of parkland character has moved into this space. So here you can see that site on the historic mapping overlaid over existing mapping. This is a map extract from 1899, so it's very soon after the house was actually built. The walled garden here predated the house that existed beforehand, but you can clearly see that wall of the enclosed garden that I was talking about there. So this is also a useful diagram in that it gives you an indication of the extent of the listed building. We talk a lot in listed buildings about curtilage of a listed building. And generally speaking, everything that's shown on this historic map existed at that time would be part of that curtilage, so would be curtilage listed. There is also a separate listing for the steps that I referred to and the terraces. So this area here and here also separately listed. And this whole area is also designated as a registered historic park and garden. There is a national register of historic parks and gardens, which are known as listed gardens, but it's not on the national register. So this is in effect locally listed in terms of the NPPF. It's considered to be a non-designated heritage asset. And on this close-up, sorry, sorry, a bit of a delay there. You can see that the buildings that still exist along Marden Hill are historic buildings Those are still in place. Also, the building at the centre of the site was historically in this position. The hatched areas all indicate areas where there was previously glass houses, and whilst these are long gone, parts of their structures survive underground. So I'd like to show you a series of photographs to explain the site. I'll skip through them and we can return to them later, but this is the best photograph that shows you the majority of the site from one place. It's from the north of the site, outside the IAIS building. And the areas you can see here paved with stone steps are the original paths, which would have allowed workers of the garden to move around between the glass houses, which would have been on the spaces in between. There would have been a glass house here. This building is one of the theatre workshops, which is a later addition from the 1950s, where there would previously have been a glass house. And the buildings that survive all the way along Marden Hill, which you can see here, were potting sheds. Those are still in position as they were. Here you can see those potting sheds, which are very prominent at the bottom end, but at this end they do disappear down behind the retaining wall. That's that's those same buildings viewed from the west, looking up Marden Hill. It's a useful time to point out how steep Marden Hill is, which is relevant in accessibility terms. It's about 1 in 6, so it's not a very good environment for providing accessible access. This is one of 2 entrances to a vault which exists beneath the site, beneath the western part of the site. And inside this vault, there is still some historic infrastructure in the form of a furnace, which would have provided a source of heat to the glass houses above. And this is presumably how that would have been serviced, bringing in coal and other materials in order to service those glass houses in growing facilities. This is what I refer to as the Mews courtyard between the former stable buildings, and this is the site up here behind this historic retaining wall. This small access here also leads into the vaults that I previously showed you. This is the site from the catering courtyard, which I already referred to, and so we're looking sort of northeast here up, and this is the development site up behind the retaining wall. So in terms of showing you through the site and the interior of the site, I thought it was helpful to do that with reference to a walking route across the site. So at the moment, the site is quite heavily used as a walking route by students and other users of the campus, from accommodation in the northwestern part of the campus through to the heart of the campus. And this at the moment is the access to that route from Marden Hill. So the route actually passes underneath these potting sheds through a gap through here and into the site. Obviously, you're looking towards Reed Hall at this point. Here on the left is one of the retained historic structures, and on the right, underneath this grassed area, is where the vault exists underneath the application site. Further south, you reach the southern extent of the site, and here you can see just in the distance the steps here, which lead up via a series of terraces up to the former productive garden up here. The thing you can obviously see here is that this site at the moment has a number of steps. It's not a very good accessible environment, being a historic environment. So on the other side, facing the Mews courtyard, at the top here is where a set of historic steps emerge. This is the top of those flight of steps, and this is the steps looking up from the Mews courtyard, which lead to that point there. These were in use until COVID, when they were closed due to social distancing. But at that time, this was one of 2 routes of these key walking routes across the campus. Now it's only through the site. They've remained closed since COVID for safety reasons. back in the site then, as you leave the site on the other side that I just explained, moving up towards the former productive garden, and the path continues up several flights of steps, each navigating one of these terraces in the former productive garden. And in this photograph, you can see that route from the other side. So the photographs I've just showed you were here, looking up from this direction. This route is known as the lit path, and as I say, it's a very heavily used walking route. This is back at the high level, and this is a photograph of the IAIS building. The significance of this particular aspect of the building is that this part of the building will be directly opposite one of the entrances to the building, so there'll be a direct relationship between the two buildings at this point here. And from here, there's also an existing access point to the former productive garden, which is accessed via this gate. But as you can see, the path quickly runs out. There's no path across this site, and it does slope quite significantly, the former productive garden. This is looking back up at that from the garden itself. You can see it here. And in this photograph, it's difficult to see, but this is right down from the southern point from the existing lit path, looking back up. So this would be the route of a new path across that garden. So before I present the scheme, I just wanted to briefly explain the application process that we've been through, and I touched on this at the beginning. So this is the application site as it was when the application was first submitted in January 2025. That initial submission did follow some pre-op discussions, but they were limited, and but they did include a presentation to the design review panel, as already discussed. So the initial application, which I'll show as relevant as I move through, was assessed, and in June of this year, officers concluded that it wasn't possible to support that scheme due to its heritage impacts, and we advised the university of that in June. There were numerous concerns relating to scale, design and materials, which I'll touch on as we move through. But another proposal was another concern, was the proposal to use this Muse courtyard, which you've seen on the photographs is a highly attractive cobbled historic courtyard. The proposal was to use that as a construction compound, so all the materials would have come in through here to go up onto the site, and that would have necessitated the demolition of some historic walls at the entrance of the courtyard as well. So officers considered this unjustified and unacceptable, and as a result, that proposal is now changed, and the site will be constructed from the catering courtyard, so the application site has now changed. Officers, after advising the university of that position, we committed to a programme of an intensive redesign to help the university and support them through to get to a scheme that we could present to you today. That included two big workshops, afternoon workshops with officers, and another design review panel that took place in July. So it was all resubmitted on the 11th of September, and we agreed to target this committee to help the university in terms of meeting their programme, ultimately, which is all driven by the need for bat licenses to destroy the bat roosts on site. So I'm not going to spend a huge amount of time explaining the changes from the initial submission to the current scheme, but suffice to say there's a lot of work that's gone into that. This single slide, I think, is a useful slide to show in summary those changes. So the top two diagrams show this is the mass of the proposal when it was initially submitted. This is the mass of the scheme that's now before you. So you can see that it previously extended quite a bit further in this direction towards Reed Hall here. It also came all the way out at level 2, all the way to this wall here, and you can see that's now been set back there and set back in this direction. It's also this on at the bottom. On the left is the original submission, and this is the revised submission. So by reducing the floor to ceiling heights on each floor, the overall height has been reduced by 1.3 meters, and also the amount of excavation has been reduced, so that the ground floor is almost a meter higher than it would have been. And that's quite helpful in respect of impacts on the vault, which will be retained. So you can see here they came very close, and there was potential for harm, and now that's moved a little further away. So this is now the revised application site showing the mass of the building and the proposals that are before you today. So I think Mr. Shawnai did explain a little bit about the purpose of the scheme for the university earlier on, so I won't spend a lot of time on this. But in essence, it's a tri-faculty facility with an academic vision of sustainable development goals in the global south, covering environmental and climate management, international studies in global governance, and global development and health. And we talked earlier about the adjacency to the IAIS building. That is a key focus area in terms of the academic vision for the scheme, and that is why the university advised it's important for the building to be located where it is now. I won't dwell on that. So in terms of the overview of the scheme itself, several areas, elements to it. So it's, in essence, it's demolition of the majority of the existing structures on the site, then it's construction of a new teaching and research building. It also includes the provision of a disabled car parking space and cycle parking, and construction of a new accessible path across the former productive garden that I showed you. And as already discussed, there is also a package of environmental enhancement measures proposed to help outweigh the harm. So this is, I acknowledge that looking at this is quite complex drawings, but in essence, everything that you see in red hatching here is an existing building which is to be demolished. The other significant thing about this drawing is it's showing all the green hatched areas are areas in which the materials are going to be reclaimed and stored for reuse. So these are all the cobbled sets, for example, which are going to be stored for reuse elsewhere. This is the equivalent drawing just shown through in sections, showing the buildings that are being demolished. And again, the green hatch shows brick in this case from brick structures, which is to be reclaimed. You can see there's no change to the vault here, but this indicates that there's a porter cabin inside the vault, which is going to be removed. So in essence, in terms of demolition, all the structures on the site will be demolished. The retaining walls all the way around the site will be retained, with the exception of the small area here and the retaining wall to Marden Hill here. This diagram shows the trees that have been to be removed. There's 14 trees to be removed in total, shown with the red crosses. None of those are category A. There's 5 category B2 trees, and the remainder are category C. So that's the sort of package of enabling works, if you like, to get to starting to build the new building. I'll now take you through the proposed floor plans and show you the proposal itself. So this is a plan showing the existing vault, which, as I said, is to be retained. This is now at the same level as the courtyard to the Muse stable buildings. So in essence, this is largely unchanged, except you can see that there is a need for some additional structures in the area outside the vault, which will support the building above. This is proposed level 0, and this is the area at which the main entrance from Marden Hill is proposed. So that is the sort of entrance walkway that I just talked about being supported down below outside the vault. The main entrance is here. There's some plant adjacent to the entrance here, And the majority of the floor space at this level is teaching areas, which you can see here, and a breakout study area. Oh, sorry, the only other point to say is that one of the revisions in the revised scheme was to excavate less in this area here, so more of the historic. There's less impact on the archaeology of the site. This is level 1. There's 2 entrances at level 1. This one here is from Marden Hill. This takes you up into the stair core, but this is largely going to be used for servicing purposes. So this is the entrance that will be used by the cafe on the upper floor to bring in the catering facilities and so on. The other entrance is from the south, and this is entered from a courtyard area here. There's no direct access entrance-wise from the former productive garden here. So that access will be from Marden Hill and this landscape garden up this flight of steps into this courtyard area. Majority of this area is where the offices and research spaces will be. So all this space on the left-hand side here is shared office space and meeting facilities. There's also a breakout area and another large teaching area which breaks out onto this courtyard area. And then the top floor of accommodation is level 2, and this is where there would be a cafe and also a breakout study area here and a large teaching space. There's also an entrance at this level, and I showed you the photograph earlier of the IAIS building, which was this point here. So this is the level access from the existing courtyard area here. So you walk along this colonnaded corridor, and the access to this level of the building is here. It's also relevant because the disabled car parking proposed is here. So this is the accessible access and the level at which the new accessible path will be accessed to move further through the campus. And then at the top floor, this is essentially roof plant, really, but it is designed as a fully screened area of the building here where the plant will be located, accessed by a staircase. You can also see there's a roof lantern here providing light to the building below. And this will be a green roof, a wildflower meadow roof with solar PV panels here as well. And this is obviously the reason why the airport are interested in avoiding glint and glare from this area in terms of aviation. So before I show you the elevations, I thought it'd be useful to have a look at the materials in brief. So the main materials that are proposed for the facing elevations are brick, which you can see here. So it's either reclaimed from the site or it's going to be proposed new, but in a similar tone to match and set within concrete frame panels, which are going to be pre-constructed off-site to ensure higher quality and for sustainability reasons. There's also small areas of concrete, exposed concrete being used, which are either in a smooth or a ribbed finish, you can see here. And the highlight materials, if you like, are hardwood for handrails and so on, and bronze metal, which are used as highlight materials. So looking through the elevations here, this is the north elevation to Marden Hill. I'll skip through these because there are some 3D views which are much easier to understand, but just to explain the distribution of the materials. So all this here is reclaimed brickwork from the existing structures on site. In places it's used in a sort of hit and miss manner to allow for ventilation to the plant and so on. The areas above are all new brickwork, which are in these prefabricated concrete panels. This is the elevation facing the IAIS building, which you can see at this level is quite discreet and small. The main thing to note here is this bronze area of panelling, which is designed to mark the entrance via that colonnade and to draw people into that second floor entrance. This is the south elevation, which in essence, as you can probably tell, is designed as the front of the building, and it will look out over the former productive garden. So one thing that we worked quite hard on with the university in the redesign process was making sure that these these columns were quite lightweight and elegant. These are in bronze, the columns that support the colonnade. They've also detailed where the gutter downpipes are. So I'm very conscious that that's a lot of detail to be presenting to you. But the reason for explaining that is that often with planning applications, the planning submission is not fully detailed. It hasn't been worked through from a construction point of view. But in this case, the architects have been appointed at REBA stage 4, which is getting ready to start building the building. So a lot of the thought has already gone into the detailing of the building, and what that hopefully means is that the committee can have confidence that what you see on the drawings will be, there's a very good chance that this is how the scheme will look, because it's already been worked through to that level of detail. Oh, sorry, yeah. So this is the same elevation, but on here I've just marked the distances, the setback from the Mews courtyard. So level 0 and 1 set back 6.6 meters here, and it's a further 3.88 meters and a further 4.5 meters at the top. Again, the same view, but this is a section through, and it's just so that it shows you that retained vault. This is now the west elevation. So this is the elevation facing towards the Mews courtyard. On this one, you can see in section, this is the vault that's retained below. And on this equivalent, you can see the relationship to the Mews courtyard. So this is the retaining wall and the existing buildings in the Mews buildings. And here, this is the entrance area from Marden Hill. This, I've already explained where the entrances to the building are, so I won't spend time talking about this drawing, but it's there for reference. It explains the various different routes around what is a fairly complex multi-level site, so we can come back to that if necessary. Onto the landscaping then. This is a 3D view looking down onto the scheme, and you can see in this view that the retaining walls around here are all retained. This is also an existing retaining wall. There's a little bit of change to the retaining walls here, but this element is to be retained, as is the element to the IAIS building. You can also see here the relationship to the existing path. So all these steps here are all existing through these terraces, as I was trying to show on the photographs earlier. You can see where the green roof would be. You can also see these dividers, which you'll see in a view later on. These are designed to divide up the external space to create sort of outdoor seating conversation areas. The area here, which has been facilitated by the redesign, because previously the building extended much further, in reducing that back, they've been able to be more generous with the landscaping, and it's been designed intentionally to have a very strong relationship between the inside of the building and the out. So this quadrilateral garden has been inspired by both Persian and Italianate garden design. I also mentioned previously the courtyard at level 1. You can see that here, and another change that was negotiated in was that you can now, although it's not promoted as a formal path across the garden, users of this courtyard will be able to now spill out and make use of this space, for example, during a conference or what have you. This is, again, the landscaping plan. The only reason I'm showing you this really is to show the alignment of the proposed new route through that garden, meeting up with the existing lit path. So that's it really in terms of presenting the scheme to you. As I say, I can come back to any of it later. In terms of assessment of the scheme, we did publicise the application through 2 rounds of publicity, and we didn't receive any public responses, and we don't have any outstanding objections from any consultees. So I'm going to focus in the rest of my presentation on 2 key issues. There were obviously other things that we've looked at and addressed, but in essence, the key issues are ecology in terms of protected species and heritage design and landscape. So I'm going to focus on those. So firstly, in terms of ecology, there was a mention earlier of bat roosts. 4 separate species of bats have been found and are known to be roosting in the site. They're all roosting in either former potting sheds here or in the vaults. Obviously, these roosts will be completely destroyed. This one will continue to be available, but in a slightly revised form. So that requires a license from Natural England. I'll explain a little bit more in a second, but there's also, just on ecology, there's also been birds' nests found in this store here. So on the bat roosting issue, the university recognised that that was a significant issue for their programme. So they've already applied for and actually now built a replacement bat roost, which is in this location here in the woodland to the north of IAIS. And they've confirmed that a bat has already been recorded using that. So that structure will essentially allow them to get the license that they need from Natural England to destroy the bat roosts. Okay, so onto the heritage assets. Excuse me a second. So just to confirm, first of all, what the heritage assets are on the site. As I mentioned earlier, Reed Hall itself is Grade 2 listed, and that covers all of the curtilage to the hall. But there are also garden steps, which are part of the Italianate terraces, which are separately listed at Grade 2. So we've got 2 Grade 2 listed structures. It's also a locally registered historic park and garden, which is considered a non-designated heritage asset in terms of the NPPF. And of course, there's the below ground archaeology. So I'm conscious this is this is really getting into the assessment of it, but in terms of the legal and the policy framework, it's really important that members are aware of, and particularly on a case like this, that need to understand the importance of the policy and of the legal framework in which we will be making this decision. So there's a requirement in legislation to give special regard to the desirability of preserving the listed building, its setting, and any features of special architectural or historic interest that it possesses. So those are set out in law. Case law has established that considerable importance and weight must be given to heritage when you're carrying out the balancing exercise, and that reflects in part the fact that, unlike other policy issues or other material considerations, the requirement to take heritage into account is in law, so it must be given more weight. Other case law, however, has established that the NPPF in its section 16, which I'll refer to various paragraphs from that, does provide us with a useful framework to carry out that assessment. So although we do have local policies, I'll primarily be referring to the NPPF paragraphs when we're considering the heritage. So the first thing we have to do in a heritage assessment, the starting point is an understanding of what's called heritage significance. So there's a requirement in the NPPF for the applicant to describe the significance of any heritage assets, and the applicant's done that in their submission. There's also a requirement on us as an LPA to identify and assess the particular significance of any heritage asset that might be affected, and that's including by development affecting setting of a heritage asset. So it's important that I take some time to set out what your officer team have concluded is the significance, the heritage significance of the assets in question. So obviously we've got Reed Hall itself, an impressive Italianate 19th century villa. The significance of that partly derives from the fact that it's got very good survival, including of its interiors, and it's also got good functional links to the historic buildings that surround it, its service functions, of which we are discussing today, and its impressive gardens. So the fact the gardens were laid out at the same time as the house, 19th century botanic gardens, and they were possibly of international importance at the time, reflecting the fact they were laid out by the Veitch family, who were renowned international plant hunters and brought back a number of species to the UK and to Europe. So it's possible that there were species here for the first time from overseas. So that's the house itself, and this is one of my annotated diagrams. But this is an aerial photograph from the 1920s, and this helps to illustrate that what is significant about the house and its gardens is the fact that it was all designed and orientated to address the south and its sort of southwestern aspects. And you can see that immediately from the place the aerial photograph was taken from. This is obviously seen as the front of the house. The gardens were designed specifically to create views from the house and from the gardens in those directions. Obviously, our site, other aspects are not in the front of that view. This is the application site itself, and you can see some of the historic structures in that photograph. There is, on the subject of significance, this is the form of productive garden. You can see here how it was laid out with this cruciform form. This has additional significance compared to other aspects because it was laid out before Reed Hall existed. So it's from the time of the Duryard Lodge. It's probably the oldest part of the layout of the site. So in terms of the site itself, the heritage significance of this part of the site relates to the gardens and the glass houses. And that's because they were laid out to grow rare, newly identified and newly important species from around the world. They were also, the glass houses were heated by technologically advanced structures, including that surviving furnace in the vault. And of course, there was historic and cultural significance because this area was used by very skilled working class gardeners working on newly imported plants for the first time. The significance is also derived from its strong material character. So I showed you some of the surviving stone set paths, and there's also brick walls and other structures. So all those aspects contribute to the significance in heritage terms of the site itself. The mews and the stable yards of Reed Hall, we've also talked about, and I'll show you the impacts on those. Obviously, I think it's clear from the photograph, it's a very high quality, it's a delightful environment, formally designed, set around that cobble courtyard, and it's the preservation of that which is of relevance to its significance, which is why officers were concerned about the proposal to use it as a construction compound. So, having identified the heritage significance, we need to consider the impacts of the development on it. And the first issue is that of the loss of those parts of the listed building that will be demolished. So, I showed you those earlier. They are considered by the conservation officer to make a moderate contribution to significance, primarily through understanding of function of the gardens, as I've just talked about. The fact that the vault is going to be retained in a largely unaltered form is very positive. So that's helpful. But there is still harm resulting from the loss of those structures. A key point here is that we think, I'll explain later, that loss of these assets can be justified in relation to being outweighed by the public benefits of the scheme, but it's really important that they're not lost independently of that, and therefore we've recommended a condition which basically seeks to prevent demolition of any of that until a contract has been signed to secure the wider redevelopment of the site. So that way you're only getting the loss and the harm in association with the development that's in front today, and they can't be separated. The demolition couldn't happen, and for whatever reason the building never happens. So we're also proposing conditions to secure detailed building recording at a high level of level 4 and to reuse materials reclaimed from the site, as I mentioned. So the next aspect of the heritage assessment is the impact on the setting of retained historic assets. And to inform this assessment, we agreed a number of views between officers and the design team, and those views were then prepared for us. So I'm going to talk you through those views now. It is important to be aware that they're not verified views as you would see in a formal landscape visual impact assessment. There's a very specific methodology for those views. They have to be done with a certain camera at a certain height. These views are not prepared in this way, but the applicant's designer has modeled this whole area in a 3D model. So the views are taken from within that model, and we think that they should be fairly representative views of how this will look. They've been produced with and without tree cover. So the ones I'll show you have a sort of transparency to them, so you can get a sense of how they would look with the trees and in the winter when there's a bit less foliage. I don't know quite, I'm not quite sure how we ended up with this numbering scheme, so I'm not going to follow them in numerical order. I'll start here and sort of work clockwise around. So this is a view taken from a stone arbor structure in the corner of the formerly laid out garden. So this is a place that's clearly historically been created with the intentional purpose of sitting and taking in the view. And that's one of the things that's significant about that. This is my photograph, but it's designed so you can see this is the former billiard room associated with Reed Hall. So for each of these, I'll show you a photograph and then I'll show you the view. You can see Marden Hall, obviously in the backdrop to this view, but this is the modelled view, and you can see that Marden Hall is still there, but this building would be much more visible in closer distance behind the billiard room. So we do think there would be some harm, moderate harm, the conservation officer concludes, in respect to this view. Moving close to the house and slightly across, my photograph is closer than the view itself, but this is the corner of Reed Hall looking over the billiard room up to the application site here. This would probably be experienced as a dynamic view as you walk past the site. As I said, the view is taken slightly further back, but here you can quite clearly see how the building would. If I go back, you can see it's got quite a clear silhouette at the moment, the billiard room, and you can see that this building would appear behind that silhouette. So we consider this to be, to be a degree of harm there to the setting of this part of the listed building. Moving around to the front of the buildings, we need to now also think about the setting of the listed steps, bearing in mind that they are separately listed. So this photograph's taken around the top of the steps that lead up through the terraces up towards the western aspect of Reed Hall, which is essentially the front elevation. You can see a little bit glimpse shots of the IAIS building in this view, but it's not highly prominent, whereas the new building would be quite prominent in those views. We are conscious that there is a lot of vegetation, a lot of trees in this area, and this is one view that we chose because you can see the building. There are a number of locations here where you won't see it, but it will be this prominent where you do. Moving towards the building now, then we don't have a view of this, but I just wanted to illustrate how that building would become more prominent the closer to the building you get. So this is from the entrance to the catering courtyard, which is on a busy path along the front. So these views from the west at the top of the steps, the conservation officer considers that there would be harm in this, and I'll talk later about the difference between less than substantial and substantial harm, but we do consider that this would be less than substantial harm, but it would be at the higher end of that. So this is a view that we're concerned about in terms of harm to the building, reflecting the fact that you're looking at the principal elevation of Reed Hall in these views, and of course that the new structure would be there. It would be a long duration impact, would be there permanently. just while I'm there, again, don't have a view of this, but I just wanted to show you while we're in this area that this is the 1970s extension into this catering courtyard. And if you compare the qualities of this courtyard to those of the Mews courtyard, you can see that its quality and its significance and character has been eroded a little in association with those works in the 70s, which is why we consider it to be less sensitive location for construction activities. This is looking up towards the site from that location, and clearly the building would be visible in that position. In terms of harm, though, as I said, because this area has been subject to change over time, it's less sensitive than the Mews courtyard to the change that it will experience. And this now is the view from the Mews courtyard. I showed you this photograph earlier, but that is the view that has been modelled. So that's as existing. You can see, although you can see the physics tower, I think, just back there, but you can see a lot of sky. Here it's fairly well preserved as it would have been. This is how that view will appear once the development has been constructed. So the change here is going to be significant, and we conclude it's at the higher end of less than substantial harm. While we're here, though, I just wanted to, for context, take a moment to illustrate the improvements that we think have been made through revisions made with the university over the summer. So the next slide shows you the scheme when it was initially submitted, and you can see here that it extended much further in here, such as it was continuous all the way across this area. And it also, because of the pergola at the cafe level, we thought unnecessarily had a mass and a scale which was more dominant and overbearing on this area than it needed to be, which is why this aspect was redesigned. I think it also shows, in terms of materiality, the impact that the materiality has. So this initially was all proposed as exposed concrete as a finish, which we felt was quite assertive and wasn't really sympathetic to the qualities of this space, in which you can see a lot of brick here, as well as natural stone. And if I flick back or onto this is a scheme that's now in front of you. So you can see here that this would be new brickwork, but the tone of that will be much closer to that of the kind of pale cream brickwork of these buildings. And you can also see how it's framed, in this case in concrete panels, but that's reflecting the design of Reed Hall, which you can see in this photograph here. So you can see this is also of yellow brick, obviously much more ornate in this building, but again, it's framed, it's yellow brick framed, in this case in natural stone detailing. So this is an intentional design strategy. This has influenced the redesign proposal. The design team, with our support, studied the whole range of buildings from the existing site right around the front to Reed Hall, and the new design is designed as a sort of counterpoint, a bookend at the other end of this range of buildings, which isn't as grand and trying to compete as much with Reed Hall, but reflects its characteristics and its materials. So moving around to Marden Hill now. This is the existing site and a street view image of that. And this is how the building would appear in that view. This is, as I said, all proposed to be ground floor. This plinth here is all proposed to be reclaimed brickwork from the site. So this is trying to build on this concept of a found wall, the existing wall here in brick being extended all the way around. So we think that's a positive reference to the site's context. We think, in terms of the significance, which we're considering here, harm to significance of the building, these views are much less sensitive than those from within the Mews Courtyard and from Reed Hall itself. So this is not a view that we're concerned about in terms of harm to significance. This one is similar in terms of its sensitivity. It could perhaps be argued to be more sensitive because obviously a building here would obscure views of Reed Hall in this view here. So you can see that's how the building would appear from that location. But in terms of views of Reed Hall, that its significance isn't derived from views of it from this direction. And in any case, as you'll see in a second on this next slide, the building, the architecture and the layout and the design of the building is going to create a number of new spaces, which will allow you to get much more positive views over Reed Hall. So while I'm here, I just wanted to highlight this is the access here, the entrance at level 2 through this colonnade from IAIS and the cafe terrace here. And what we think is important about this is this is essentially designed as the front of the building, and it's got a much more positive relationship to the retained historic garden here. So it's really enhancing and allowing this area to be better revealed in terms of its significance. So this isn't a view in which officers have identified harm. It's much more of a potential to add benefit here. That's a 3D view, which I'm not going to talk about now, but we can come back to as necessary. So I've talked a lot about substantial versus less than substantial harm, which is language given to us by the MPPF. It is very important, and I'm not intending to you'll be relieved here to read any of that out, but there are 2 paragraphs in the MPPF that set out different policy regimes depending on whether harm to a heritage asset is found to be substantial, stroke total loss, or less than substantial. So the really important point here is that although we have found harm in numerous locations, and some of it, has a degree of harm to that significance, we are absolutely clear that in no cases do we consider that harm to be substantial. We consider that to be less than substantial in every respect. And what that means significantly is that we review it under paragraph 215 rather than 214. And what that does is intentionally allows the harm to be weighed against the public benefits of a proposal. So it sets up a balancing exercise where you can take the public benefits into account. And that's really important for the scheme, as we've talked about. It does have very significant and numerous benefits as well. So I'll talk about those now. So you've heard a little bit about the economic benefits from Mr. Shaw and I on behalf of the university earlier today. I also, in the report, referred you directly to the statement provided by the university. That's partly because it's quite difficult to summarise this type of benefit, and I didn't want to do it any injustice by incorrectly summarising it. But around 80 additional academic jobs we referred to earlier, international postgraduate teaching, annualised income 6.7 million, research income 2 million, and also the potential to attract additional international students, obviously given the use and its relationship to IAIS and the academic vision, very significant. A study in 2023 for the 21-22 cohort found that international students contributed 140.7 million to Exeter's economy. So it's very significant benefit in economic terms from this academic use. It will also provide general use teaching space for the university, so it will also address a number of their other aspirations in terms of multifunctionality. It will also, have other economic benefits in terms of jobs, employment in the cafe, facilities management. There'll be short-term economic benefits from the construction, 7.5 to 8 million in local businesses and subcontractor arrangements through construction, support local skills growth and community and cultural engagement. All that's covered in that detailed statement that I referred you to. It'll also have wider campus benefits. So we talked about the new accessible path, which is going to provide significant benefits in terms of equalities by providing a new accessible path in this, what I've explained is currently a very sloping environment. So that's a significant benefit. It'll also provide benefits in terms of overlooking the adjacent public space, safety benefits and so on. And the new cafe will create excellent new spaces with new views, landscape views across the city and over the retained listed buildings. And on top of that, we as an officer group have acknowledged that all those benefits I've already talked about are very significant. But we also felt that it was important that this scheme, because it was leading to some harm to Reed Hall as the principal historic asset here, that it also generated benefits and improvements to other aspects of Reed Hall. So because of that, we've negotiated a package of improvements and enhancements to the historic environment surrounding the site, which would be ultimately secured by conditions. We don't yet have all the details of those, but there is a condition attached to the report requiring full details of all of these aspects, and they will have quite a significant impact on the scheme. So there's a package of 8 different measures which we can show you, but I'll just very briefly show you the areas that they relate to. So one of them is reopening and starting a strategy to renovate and restore the terraces, which you can see here. These have been closed off for some time. The lower terrace here, which is the one immediately above the catering courtyard, can be reopened immediately with some tidying up works, and that will allow a new public route across from the former billiard room across to the site, which, given the new use of the building, we would envisage could be significantly subject to high levels of use, and that will better reveal the heritage significance of the building. I already talked about the steps there. One aspect is that we will secure a scheme to restore and reopen those steps down into the courtyard. We would also like to see a scheme to improve these railings, given that they're a very basic sort of galvanized highway spec, and they will be adjacent to the listed building and will be adjacent to the new building. That may be more difficult as they have a retaining function in relation to highway safety and so on, but the university can look at what they can do to improve that. And then here in the entrance to the vaults I already talked about, they would also commit to tidying up this area here to remove or relocate the unsightly plants and so on, which will improve this area, which is going to be much more visible following the development. I think this is the final one. I talked previously about the former gardens and the loss of the southern historic walls of the gardens, which have allowed the character to change very significantly from a productive working, formally laid out garden into an extension of this, more parkland tree character here. As part of the proposals to provide a new path across the site, the university have agreed to provide an intervention at the point at which the path would cross the line of the historic route, and so that will improve the legibility of the garden by going some way towards sort of restoring and making its previous use more legible. It's likely to include a small element of historic wall and a line of wall shown in the paving. That's all subject to further condition, and we've also secured agreement for the university to look at doing the same thing at this point where the existing path crosses that same historic wall alignment. Finally, this is on the steps to the east of the building, and you can see here that they're in need of some restoration works here. This balustrade on the left hand side needs rebuilding, so that would be part of that package. of enhanced measures. So I think you'll agree quite a numerous package of benefits there, which ultimately we as an officer team think are sufficient to outweigh the harm to the heritage significance at the site, which we've also outlined. We're absolutely clear that the harm will be less than substantial, and therefore it can be outweighed by public benefits in accordance with the NPPF. I've outlined the package of significant economic and social benefits, as has Mr. Shawnai earlier today. And in addition, we've secured that package of enhancement measures to tip the balance in favour of approval. So subject to conditions securing those as approved and subject to the amendment sheet that I mentioned earlier, we recommend that both applications be approved subject to those conditions. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much indeed, John, for a very detailed and comprehensive presentation. I'm now going to invite members of the committee to ask questions, but I'm going to use Chair's prerogative and get a couple in first. In your presentation, you talked about a level 4 recording of the stuff that's going to be lost. Obviously, normally with a listed building, everything's talking about sort of landed gentry and posh houses and all the rest of it. This is a working man's environment. The glass house, the greenhouses, the potting sheds, and all the rest of it. What does level 4 recording actually entail? What's going to be preserved and how is it going to be preserved? And my second question is, you mentioned a couple of times about the steepness of the hill. And this path is the new path is supposed to be accessible, but can we understand what actual gradient that's going to be going from the top to the bottom? Thank you.
Mark, I've accidentally pressed the wrong mouse. So while I'm answering the questions, Mark, would you be able to get the presentation back on the keyboard? Ah, there we go. Brilliant. Thank you. Yeah, thank you, Chair. Very, very useful question. So level 4 recording, there is a document provided by Historic England, which is referred to in the report, which is all about building recording, and it explains the different levels of building recording. Level 4, based on my understanding from the conservation officer, it is a very high level to expect, and it's essentially targeted at a level which will ensure that everything is recorded to an extent where once that's archived, which is also a requirement of the condition, so that would be deposited at RAM as part of the requirement to meet the archaeology condition, there's enough information there that a researcher in the future who wanted to know and undertake a research project, for example, about the technology of glasshouse heating in this area, it's providing enough information for them to really get into a much more detailed study. So it's a very high level, and we consider it sufficient to, sort of equivalent to being able to see that now. It'll be transferred into a written form and available for future researchers to fully understand the proposal. And of course, as they sort of strip back the site and demolish aspects of it, we would anticipate that more information will become known about how the structures work. They're probably underground ducts and so on for channeling the heat around from there. So all that will become better revealed, to use this heritage language, and documented through that condition. I don't know that much more about it, so I don't know if I can answer any more detailed question than that, but that's that. In terms of the path through the garden, it is to a level which is considered to be fully accessible. I think I'm trying to remember now, 1 in 21 is considered to be essentially flat. I don't think it's that. I think it's 1 in 12, but it is to a level which is, acceptable for full use by wheelchair users, etc.
All right, I have Councillor Atkinson first, and then Mitchell and Ralston. Councillor Atkinson, please.
Yeah, my question follows on from the chairs, really. It's in relation to Marden Hill. Obviously, those historic potting sheds are going to be proposed to be demolished. They look quite attractive to me and quite historic, as the chair has said, in terms of like the functionality of the working class aspects of it. So what is the current use of those potting sheds? Why are they not considered appropriate to retain? And couldn't the design of the building as it is abutting to that, couldn't it just have been taken back so as to incorporate those in it? I mean, and moved it slightly a bit forward. I just wondered why they have been sacrificed, unless they're, because it's very kind of pleasant, view walking down Marden Hill to see those historic potting sheds, and obviously some of the lower level are going to be retained. So what was the thinking why they could be sacrificed? And from an architectural point of view, why couldn't they have been incorporated in the proposed design?
Okay. Yeah, sorry. They have been in use as part of as an extension to the theatre workshop, which is the larger building, the more modern building in the site. But they are not actively in use at the moment. I think that reflects the fact that they're used by bats. So, for example, during the winter, bats are hibernating, in those areas and are very sensitive to use. So essentially, the university is not. I don't know the exact time period, but I understand they haven't been used for some time, and we weren't able to get in there, for example, at that time due to the activities, the ecological interest in the site. In relation to whether they could be retained, the comments from in terms of their value, first of all, and their heritage significance, which is what we're required to consider, the conservation officer has identified that whilst they are of historic interest because they are original structures from the time that the site was laid out, in themselves they are not of any particular sort of architectural or historic merit. So there will be numerous equivalent kind of brick sheds all over the country around historic buildings. So their significance really relates to their use and how they contributed to the use of this garden as such in its technology and through the glass houses. So the buildings in themselves probably wouldn't be worthy of listing because they're not of particular merit. It's part of that group use across the site. In terms of whether they could have been retained, my understanding there is that on a heavily constrained site like this, the university, in order to make this a worthwhile development, a usable development, weren't able to consider a smaller building here at all. So retaining those structures would have taken a reasonable footprint out of the development site, which is already a very highly constrained site, and also would have posed challenges in terms of their incorporation architecturally. So we were advised that wasn't possible. But at the same time, as I say, the conservation officer had identified that it's a record of their use is almost more important than their retention alone as simple structures.
Thank you. Okay, Councillor Mitchell, please.
Thank you, Chair. Just 3 points, if I could. First of all, at one stage you talked about the landscape assessment and said that the criteria hadn't been met, but you were satisfied with the way the documents, photographs and presentations were presented to you. Could you please clarify for us whether there is a legal requirement for them to do them at the required standard, or does the LPA have discretion on that matter, because it's a serious aspect of this particular application? The second point I'd like to clarify is the issue of setting with Reed Hall. We saw a tremendous number of photographs about what we were looking out from Reed Hall. I have not got a clear picture in my mind of the impact of this building upon Reed Hall. In other words, I've not seen a 3D visualization. Reed Hall, here's the new building, how close are they? What's the impact upon, as a visual representation, if I was a person walking up there and seeing them, what is the impact of the setting of the new building as against the old building, rather than the impact from the building. And the third point is a rather minor one, but we have had issues in the ward in that area, and it's also now applying to West Park development as well, of an ordnance survey. I didn't see any requirement within your stipulations that there should be any form of ordnance survey, and I just know whether it's a valid point to raise with the university because of the problems we had on the previous site adjacent to the university.
Yeah, thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Yeah, a very useful question. So the first one was what I was referring to when I talked about views is, let me remember the language, verified views. So verified views are something that's very important in landscape visual impact assessment. So if you're assessing a solar farm or something over a very long distance, it's a process which is designed to ensure that the representation is accurate in relation to where you're stood and what angle. So it's a methodology, a standard methodology for that type of assessment, landscape visual impact assessment. This isn't really a landscape visual impact assessment. This is more of a traditional townscape, or an assessment of how a building would appear in its built environment. So there is no legal requirement to do it in a certain way. It's really just about the planning authority officers and members having confidence that what they see on these visualizations is going to be reasonably accurate in terms of what gets built later. And there are developments where you look back at them later and they don't look anything like what what the visualizations show. But we are very confident because of we've worked quite closely through these workshops with the designers, and they've built a three-dimensional model of this whole area from topographic information. So it's because of that these views that I've shown are not photographs with a building sort of drawn in. They are an accurate three-dimensional computer-generated representation, and they've taken into account the buildings in between. So there's no legal requirement. We could insist on one if we wanted. We didn't think it was absolutely necessary in this case, and it would have incurred quite a bit of program delay because there's quite a time and it's quite a procedural thing to do. You have to get a special company and special cameras, and so we ultimately didn't think it was necessary. And that leads us on to your, it's not your last question, is it? Sorry. Yeah, the setting. Yeah. So I don't think. I think the reason why you haven't seen the view that you haven't seen is because I don't think it will exist. So we have asked for a number of views, and we've been around in the model, and let's have a look from over there, let's have a look from over there. This is how the discussion about trees or no trees happen. But unless you're taking an aerial view, which we're not all flying around, the views that we've studied are the ones where we think you'll be able to see those two buildings together. So I must admit, we may not have that 3D aerial view showing the two buildings next to each other, but in terms of assessment of heritage impact, that's because we don't think anybody would ever see that. So it's not something that we would need to assess. So the views that we did walk around are all the viewpoints from which we think there would be an impact on the building from where you would see this new building alongside the existing building. I'll let you come back in a second if you want to ask more about that. The ordnance survey, I am aware of that. We've been dealing with that. I've been the case officer dealing with that at West Park. There was, as one of the geotechnical studies done as part of the original application submission, there was a geotech survey which included a section on ordnance and reviewed that, but didn't consider that to be a high likelihood. It wasn't a detailed study of the type that those ordnance studies are. We could request that that's looked at. The university will be having to address that problem on West Park, and so they will know the way that we do that. My understanding is the best way for us to do that is to attach an informative to ask the university to look at that. The responsibility for ensuring for dealing with that risk rests with the university. I've learned through my recent studies of this, but I think it's highly unlikely that there would be that type of thing in this environment, because it would have caused damage, obviously, to the structures, and it's quite an intact environment. But if members wanted us to attach that informative, we could do that.
Of course. On the second point, on the setting one, I just want to see the conjunction of the two buildings together in the visualization. Is that possible, or the distance they are apart, etc.? We spent a lot of time on the landscape, the impact of the grounds of there, but little to the setting of the two buildings. If Reed Hall is important as listed too, presumably it requires a little bit of context when new buildings are put around it.
Can I ask that we go to slide 59, please?
Thank you.
So you see, Councillor Mitchell, so we're talking about, so Reed Hall's on the left there, the building right in front of you is the billiards thing, and that's going to be the impact that the new building will have on that principal view from the gardens. That's from what I understand from the presentation so far, that is the most impactful and damaging view in terms of spoiling what was there before, and that's what we've got to try and form out.
We're sorry, we didn't insist that they detailed up all the intricacies of Reed Hall, and therefore it looks more like a brick warehouse in form here. But this is it, and you can see in this view here that it's the building on the left hand side here as well. So the views that we've looked at are all those. They're the only ones where you can see the two alongside each other. Thank you for helping with the slides.
Thank you, Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. First of all, thank you for rearranging the agenda, and sorry for keeping people waiting. Traffic issues. I've got two questions. The first one is the accessible route that's going to be improved and as part of this. Can you just confirm whether that's part of the wider kind of public access routes around, the university? We've got a lovely sculpture walk and things as well, so that actually it's going to benefit not only the students and faculty, but in general public as well. I think that's my understanding, but if you could confirm, that would be great. And my second question is around whether you could explain a little bit more the mitigation for the removal of the trees, mainly for any kind of public watching, and what those kind of categories of trees were that you mentioned, given that this is the site was around the gardens and the beach gardens, and what the implications of that are. And as a very small one after that is, how do you move a bat, just out of interest? How do they, and how is that built into the kind of the plan? I understand that Nature England are satisfied with the building of the new bats house, roost, can't remember what you said it was called, and that bats have been seen in it, but just how would that process work? Thank you.
No problem. Yeah, it's a good question, the last one. So the first question, in terms of public access to the new route, so I've shown the new route here. I haven't had a conversation with the university about whether it'll be publicly accessible or not, but I anticipate that it will be. There would be no barriers to entry to it. This lit path route is currently publicly accessible. There's no gates to it. There is a gate here, but I must admit I haven't questioned that and whether it's still going to be there. But my understanding is that it's a new route to serve the campus and to allow for movement around the campus. So I imagine it will be open all of those hours that would be necessary. That would be my answer to that one. In terms of mitigation to the trees, so there's numerous different aspects now to how trees are considered. So the first one I talked about the tree category, and I said there was no category A trees and that these are all Bs and Cs, mainly Cs. That relates to the sort of traditional amenity assessment of the value of trees. So the arboricultural officer for the council has assessed all the trees and can confirm that none of them meet the level of test as a category A probably would, for example, to require a tree preservation order. So in amenity impacts, they are not considered of that value. They're also not of such, rare species or so on. I have proposed an informative to pass on advice from the arboricultural officer, which is that some of the trees are quite young and could potentially be relocated, translocated somewhere. So whilst we don't consider them TPO worthy, so we can't sort of insist on that, we're recommending that the university do that, and they've obviously got adequate grounds to be able to plant them somewhere else. The other aspect to trees is that trees that are being lost are considered as part of the biodiversity net gain assessment. So the loss of those trees has been counted. So the baseline is counted, and they obviously have to provide 10% more in terms of biodiversity trees. So those trees contribute to that baseline, and therefore the 10% biodiversity net gain, which will be provided partly on site, partly off site, does reflect and take into account and mitigate the loss of those trees. And the last one, whilst I'd love to ask for a site visit to see the university, I don't know, offering insects in a trail across the campus, I don't think it happens like that. I think it's basically they've provided the compensatory, roost as an alternative location, and once the license is granted, they can essentially. So they will wait for the bats to leave the roost so that the bats are not in there, and then they will prevent access to the existing roosts, and the compensatory roost exists, so the bats, will find that presumably.
You can lead a horse to water, but you can't necessarily lead a bat to roost. Okay, Councillor Ketchum first, then Councillor Paul.
Can I ask, is the solar array just illustrative? Because I noticed the sports centre, which is about 100 metres beyond, is sort of fully decked out in solar to the max. And there's been a sort of a comment from the airport that, you can't possibly have a big solar array there, but yet there is one already. And the other question I had is just about on Marden Hill. It obviously looks onto Marden Hall, which is, I don't know if that's listed, but it's a significant, is it not? Okay. It's it's an eye-catching building, and it's quite a blunt relief on this building as you walk past it up Marden Hill, and I just wondered if there's any thought to sort of improve that or not.
So the first question in relation to solar, there is a requirement set out in our local consultation list of the situations and the locations in which we are required to consult the airport for them to consider aviation safeguarding, and this scheme is very much at the sort of western periphery of that requirement. So the other solar farm that you mentioned, for example, is outside of that area. So the reason why that won't have been considered is because it's not in a location that the airport have identified it can generate a risk for them in terms of aviation glinting, which is surprising. I know it's very close, but I mean, we think that it's very unlikely that this solar, wouldn't be able to go ahead following this clinical air assessment, but the airport are wanting that to be properly assessed and demonstrated to them. It may be that there are particular finishes of solar panel, different types of glass and so on that could mitigate that if they do consider that glint and glare is a concern. In terms of Marden Hall, we have spent significant periods of time considering the design of the north elevation, which was my last one, wasn't it? I think. Here we are conscious that that is a more, I suppose, a more austere, blanker elevation. We have considered that in great detail with the design team, and that's led to these features. For example, here marking the corner. So this is treated slightly differently to mark the corner in a concrete finish, and this area here is designed intentionally as a sort of as a viewing point to encourage activity at this building. The views from here will be very impressive, apparently. So we have looked at that. We've also looked at the entrance here because, as I said in my presentation, it is possible that you would consider that this ought to be the main entrance to the building when you approach from this side, but it isn't really, which is why it's been sort of downplayed and made quite simple. So we are conscious that this isn't the in design terms isn't the very strong inviting principal elevation, but we don't consider it to be harmful in terms of the heritage asset, and we consider that the south elevation facing towards Reed Hall is in effect much more important and is the higher quality elevation. So it's a difficult site basically. It's got sort of four fronts, and we've taken this as far as we can, and we think in particular the proposed use of the reclaimed brick is a very positive move in terms of the heritage. So that's the key aspect of this elevation. Thank you.
Can we move on to Councillor Paul, please?
Thank you very much. I just wonder, could you take us back to the site itself? Because I just want to be very clear about what we're losing on the actual footprint.
Yeah, the demolition plan.
Well, just of what's there already, because I think is that where the 70s building is? It in the actual footprint, or is that in an adjacent courtyard? Because there's two.
Sorry, let me go right
there
back
appear
to
to be
beginning.
two structures in the actual. There seems to be quite a nice kind of brick walkway that you were saying was where in the potting in the greenhouse, because basically the site that they're going to be building on is the greenhouse area of the original house.
7. What number am I on now? Sorry, I can't see the numbers here. That one?
Where the greenhouses, the sort of footprint of the greenhouses now is there. There, yeah. So,
Thank you.
so there's two structures in that. Like, obviously, we've got some. I mean, it's a sort of, indeterminate in sort of interest, I suppose. Sort of at the moment, it's not actually that beautiful sort of an area at the moment. But you're saying that there's on the sort of right hand side, sort of where the graffiti is it? That was an original brick walkway where the.
So shall I just explain what we've got on this photograph?
See what we're looking at there.
So I think the first thing to say, I don't think it's graffiti. I presume it's some kind of chalk or whatever for theatre use. It's not there anymore.
Okay.
Don't worry.
Right.
So these were the walkways between the greenhouses.
Yeah.
And these were original kind of planter positions. there was a large greenhouse in the middle here. And
Right.
there was also one on the right-hand side of this path. Now, I haven't included a good photograph of it because it isn't considered to be a structure of high value, but this building here is the building that continues to be in use as a theatre workshop. So this is supporting.
And that's an original building.
No, this is believed to be a 1950s building.
50s.
So this is a building which we don't consider to have any value
Right.
and wouldn't be concerned about.
And it's
it being-
currently got props and things in it, you think?
I don't. Yeah. I mean, I've only looked through the window, but it was in use several times when I visited the site. The potting sheds are the other side. So you've got this wall here, which is the back
Yeah,
of the potting
I
sheds.
understand where the potting
Yeah,
sheds are. It's
okay.
more just I felt like I hadn't really kind of got to grips with what was in this actual.
No. Well,
footprint.
inside the site, this is the only retained building.
And what was that then? That
Well,
was-
it's
you don't
referred to
know?
in some elements as a climber store, but I don't know whether that means climbing in terms of climbing plants or climbing structures. It's not of high value, basically. It is one of those structures that we think was probably there historically. It may have been altered,
Mm.
but it was a it was a functional building.
So there's really not much there at the moment, and we're going to take the bricks and reuse them to the extent they can be in the materials. Okay.
Yeah.
My next question was just about, I'm a little bit confused about the route of the lit path and where is that kind of are people going to sort of walk through the new building, or are they going to be redirected? I'm a little bit confused about where that.
That's fine. I skipped over that. I skipped over that slide, didn't I? Which had all the arrows on it, and I think that's a bit further along. I don't remember where it was now. Probably at the end here.
Because the lit path at the moment goes
Right.
through that site, does it?
So the lit path, I believe that historically or pre-COVID, it was via this flight of stairs, which are now closed, which were closed during COVID, and presumably also via this gap in the buildings here. So there were two ways to get down from this area over here onto the lit path. Since these were closed for COVID and not reopened, the only way in now is here.
Which will no longer exist.
Which will no longer exist. So following the development, as part of the package of improvements, these will be reopened.
Okay.
So people would be able to walk through the courtyard up here, around and up the steps. Obviously, that's not an accessible route, as it has never
That's
been.
the Muse courtyard.
From the Muse courtyard, yeah, from the attractive cobbled courtyard, those steps rise up there.
Okay.
At the moment, the route through from here obviously will be removed, but it'll be replaced by this route along the side of the building, which will lead past these outdoor seating spaces to the quadrilateral garden and then onto the lit path. Or, of course, if you're higher up Marden Hill, for example, you're coming from Holland Hall, you'll be able to move in a much more accessible route. And there it has the answer to my previous questions, 1 in 21 at the start and 1 in 18. You will then be able to move through that path to the heart of the campus that way. So it'll still have the level of permeability and the ability to move around it that it has at the moment, but obviously it'll also be a functioning building with people using these spaces and using these spaces here.
I see. So those paths, the path to the left it's not sort of, it's not be sort of gated or anything. It's just going to be, that's just a permeable path around the building. The building is not going to come all the way up to the retaining wall of the Muse courtyard.
No, there's a sort of gateway that you would pass under here, but it's not gated. This is a sort of canopy over the entrance, but no, you'll be able to walk all the way down the side of the building over what is now that sort of grassy area that I showed with the vaults underneath. You'll be walking along there, and then you can access the existing routes.
Am I correct? So in the Muse courtyard, we've got what's now the student wellbeing or health centre.
Health centre, yeah.
And is that sort of contiguous with the billiard hall of Reed Hall?
No,
Well-
because in between we've got, so you can walk through from the courtyard, the Muse courtyard. You can walk through here. It was on one of my photographs.
Yeah.
And then you come into the
Oh,
catering courtyard. But then to carry on further to get to the billiard room or the other side of Reed Hall, you then got to exit via that and walk along the front of Reed
Oh, it's at
Hall
the front.
and around the side.
Oh, okay.
Now, in the future, one of the benefits that we are, we've got the university to agree, is that this terrace here will be reopened. So that will provide a new, well, it'll reopen
be good,
a
yeah.
historic route around the back, linking the billiard hall with the new site.
Okay, because some of the buildings at the back of Reed Hall look to be of sort of less, they're less imposing than the ones at the front. And are they, as far as you understand it, are they all original, or have any of them been added sort of during World War I or?
So on the historic maps I showed, you can see the original buildings. There's a significant 1970s extension in this courtyard on the right hand side here, and there's also an addition, small addition to the back of the stable buildings here. So I'm looking now for my aerial photographs and the historic map here. So you can see this is all Reed Hall. This is the original part of Reed Hall, but all this here, which is a single story extension, is the 1970s catering extension in that courtyard.
And that's sort of closer to the site. That is the sort of part that's closer to the site. Any
Closest to Reed Hall.
to the planning site is.
No, well, this
No.
one is the closest to the site because it's immediately adjacent with the big retaining wall here.
Yeah,
But
but
this
of the
one is
actual
Further away.
main Reed Hall.
Yes,
It's
to the main
closer
hall.
to the sort of less, to the sort of more. And then, so just going back to the question about the potting sheds, my understanding is that none of those will be retained because the building to the south of is it to the west or whatever, downhill
Yeah.
from the potting sheds is actually, is that a former stable? No,
Yeah.
or is that a,
So these buildings, sorry, I'm gonna find my mouse. So these are the former stables buildings here, either side of what I've referred to as the Muse courtyard.
Yeah.
These buildings will be retained, as will this gap between Marden Hill and those buildings, which provides that access through to that archway into the vaults.
furnace? Yeah.
They are all to be
Retained.
retained. So
And so all of the potting sheds effectively will be
the
going,
potting sheds start here and extend up to that boundary there, and they will all be going.
will
Yeah.
be going, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay. I think those were all my questions. Thanks very much. Yeah.
No, I'm very conscious. This is
Thank
quite
you
complex
very
site.
Okay, a final call from members. Yes, Councillor Banyard.
Can we look at the list of benefits on slide 81? So a long way, isn't it? Sorry. So
Several slides with benefits, but
So my understanding is that the weighing up of the less than substantial harm, it was important to show that there were some benefits to the scheme. And so can the officers confirm that all of these bullet points are contributing to the decision on that? Because when I'm looking at these bullet points, some of these don't really relate to this individual building. For example, saying that 9% of Exeter's GDP is a benefit for having a university, but that doesn't mean that this building is making that benefit. And there's several others there. So would a more focused list make the balance tip in favour of not permitting this development? I'd love to hear your opinions about that.
it's a very good question, and it's something that we've been very conscious of. And with this type of economic benefit from a future research use, it's quite difficult to quantify that. So yes, we were conscious that the list of benefits, as they were set out in the statement, I don't know whether you've looked at the statement I referred to, but the statement submitted by the university, a lot of those benefits listed are demonstrating benefits of the university as a whole rather than as this building. I've translated that in terms of what is significant about this building into confirming that this building is maintaining and enhancing that status and the contribution that makes. But we as an officer group, we were conscious that some of these benefits, well, our view is that there will be very significant economic and social benefits from the scheme, but we're also conscious that they're quite difficult to quantify specifically to this building. So you'll probably notice in my report that I focused in on these specific ones. So 6.7 million of income and research income, 2 million, 80 additional academic jobs. There are a number of those that are very specific to this proposal. There are others that are about the university, which we accept this will sort of maintain and enhance what that already does. But in answer to your specific question, we are aware of that, and we are not, the balancing exercise that we've done is not been on the basis of the benefits of the university itself. It is on the benefits that we anticipate would arise from this specific building. However, one point I would wish to make is that is one of the reasons that we've sought to negotiate this list of 8 additional sort of heritage environmental benefits. They weren't initially offered by the university, but we felt that they would be important and are, because they're very, very clear interventions of relevance to the heritage significance of the site, we felt that they were necessary in order to tip the balance. So whilst we're very, very conscious that we believe the economic benefits will be very significant, we also wanted those just to be absolutely clear that there's a specific relationship between harm to this building and benefits to this building, and with that package from this proposal alone, we have concluded that we consider the harm is outweighed. Thank you.
Thank you, members. I hope we've now exhausted questions to the officer, because I do want to move into the debate stage. We're rapidly losing the evening on this, and I don't want to rush the decision, but I do want to move on now to debate. Thank you very much indeed, John, for your presentation and your patience in the answering. So now moving on to debate. Councillor Pole.
Yeah, so I think it's actually quite, given the cultural context of this site, the building was funded from the proceeds of the East India Company, and the origins of the botanical gardens were sort of, quite sort of global in nature. I think it's quite fitting that the that the purpose of the building is forecast to benefit the sustainability of the global south. I appreciate the efforts to reduce the massing in order to reduce the impact on the long distance views and the sort of overbearing on other features like the courtyard. I think it's very positive that there'll be routes through to the courtyard side, because I think sort of as some, when you walk around the campus, sometimes it's a little bit disjointed, and I think anything that can be done to sort of join that up and make it a more kind of sort of fluid walking experience for people trying to enjoy the gardens would be very positive. I thought the pergola in the original proposal looked quite nice, and I think it's quite positive that more people will be able to sort of enjoy the sort of beauty of the existing courtyard actually. But I think obviously that sort of understand that sort of those walking routes and the less massing is a positive. Yeah, I think those are my main sort of thoughts about it, really.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. Councillor Williams.
Thank you, Chair. And just add my thanks to John and the officers for an incredibly detailed presentation. I think it's one thing that sticks out as being particularly of use to us as decision makers is to see how the application has progressed over time and the modifications that have been made on both sides in response to feedback from officers. I think incredibly interesting in terms of balancing heritage alongside, the fact that we've got a modern and existing current university. I am heartened by having looked a bit further into what a level 4 survey actually entails, and that on the Historic England website, and that those things that are being lost are actually perhaps going to be further enhanced in terms of, I wouldn't have known they were there, and I've been around and about Reed Hall and the university campus for an awful long time, so actually have more information as to their significance to in their place in Exeter's history, I think is very, very welcome. As is, I think the fact that the materials of that's going to be lost will be remediated in the building works. I think now what results is a building that is better now than it was to start with. I think that's what the conservation officer's point was, with some modifications and some benefits to improvements to the existing site in and around Reed Hall, albeit given the fact that there is some harm as well. But on balance, I think that it's an application that I feel I'll be able to support, Chair. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Williams. Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, Chair. As this is in my ward, I actually welcome this application because I think it's a sustainable development on an existing site where it can accept this scale of development. I think it's important for us to see the importance of the university as an economic driver for the city as a whole and for the sub-region, whatever unitary authority comes about at the end of the day. And I'm pleased that over the officer's report, we can see, as Councillor has just stated, we've got a situation where something has evolved and changed and improved, and that's been done in partnership with the university and the planning. It wasn't a tension situation from what we can read from what the report. And I think what you've got there is to bring the mixture of the old and the recycling and the use of the site and a belief in the heritage that is important there to be maintained and sustained with what is now a modern use of that site, which I think, as I say, I would on this occasion wholeheartedly support the university's application.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. I'd like to echo what Councillor Pole said about the use of this site and the kind of the cultural aspect to it, given the origins of some of the funds of the building. But I'd also like to just take this time to say how it's just struck me that this is going to be passive house standard. And I think we need to recognise the amazing opportunity for that. And it's almost like because we know we have other passive house standard sites in Exeter already, it's almost a passive house, yeah, okay. But actually, I think that's really significant to have that standard building on this site. Again, in a nod to the fact that potentially the site was part of a revolution in that having that furnace underneath to heat the gardens and the standard of the buildings then. So I also echo that the modifications that have happened and the process of that shouldn't be underestimated for the work of both the team of the university and of officers. And for all of those reasons, I'm very positive about this application. We'll be supporting it.
Thank you, Councillor Ralston. Councillor Ketchum.
Just a quick one, just to say that such has been the level of detail and the spotlight put on the heritage aspects of this. It's shown great sensitivity, and I'll support this also on the heritage theme. I feel like during the space of the last hour and a half, I've aged years myself.
Thank you, Councillor Ketchen. My comments relate to, again, this is, as often happens in this committee, a matter of balance. One of the things that has really impressed me is the way in which not just the officers and the various elements of the design team, but the way in which the university has also combined in order to be able to produce an evolved and sound scheme. I'm really actually very impressed with this. I'm impressed with the fact that people are aware of working class culture and history and in preserving that. So I'm certainly going to be supporting this application. With that in mind, does anybody else wish to make a contribution to the debate? In that case, I move to the director, please, for your summing up.
Thank you, Chair. In fact, I'm going to say very little because I think the members of the committee have pretty much said what I was going to say in all aspects, really. They clearly understood the critical issue, which is how you can make a balanced decision based on an assessment that the harm is less than substantial. I would just like to take the opportunity just to thank my team, because it's clear that a lot of work has gone into this application over quite a short period of time as well. It took place over the summer, 2 or 3 months of really intensive work with the university to achieve those improvements, but also secure that package of enhancement measures, which helped, I think, for your understanding about how to achieve that balance and overcome the less than substantial harm. So nothing more to say other than that, Chair.
Thank you, Director. At this stage, I don't feel or sense from the room that there's any amendments coming from the floor. In that case, I shall propose the motion that we accept. If we could move to the slide, please, with the recommendations. So it's clear, that's it, the grants, yeah. Okay, so these are the two elements here that we are granting planning permission subject to the conditions set out in the report, including those amendments which are set out in the supplementary document, the update sheet, and grant the listing building consent. Is there a seconder, please? I see Councillor Ketchin first. Councillor Ketchin, thank you very much for seconding that. I shall now move to the vote. Can those who are in favour of that motion please indicate?
That's unanimous, Chair.
10 unanimous.
Have been carried.
Thank you very much indeed, committee. I now propose a 2-minute rest and respite before we go into the next item, which could be equally lengthy. So. Thank you. If you can continue the recording, please. Committee, we are at agenda item 6, planning application number 231532 OUT, Sandy Park Farm. Okay, and where are our speakers on this one? All right, we have no councillors speaking under Standing Order 44. We have an objector, that is Mr. Pete Thomas from Bell Cornwall Town and Planning Consultants. So, Mr. Thomas, please. Thank you, Mr. Thomas. As you may have gathered from the proceedings here, you have 5 minutes. I hope in that you've worked out the microphone system. Okay, so we're ready.
Thank you, Chair and members. I'm speaking on behalf of our client, the Exeter Rugby Group, who have serious concerns about the procedural validity, access arrangements and policy compliance of this proposal. Whilst we recognise the reasons for refusal already identified by officers, there are other further material considerations which require members' attention. The policy issues are detailed in the officer's report, but we reiterate that the emerging Exeter Local Plan policy EJ6 designates this land as a transformational employment allocation. The proposal to deliver 158 dwellings therefore represents a material departure from emerging policy. No overriding justification or demonstrable planning need has been advanced to justify such departure. Our clients are particularly concerned about the highway implications, especially on match days when congestion in this area can already be difficult. The additional traffic from 158 dwellings in particular would significantly worsen existing congestion and could impede emergency vehicle access, which is unacceptable to our clients. Of even greater concern is a fundamental procedural omission that goes to the heart of the application's validity and deliverability. As shown on the applicant's location plan, the red line boundary does not extend fully to the edge of the roundabout, providing access. There is a gap between the site boundary and the highway, and that land is in the ownership of our clients. Under the National Planning Policy Practice Guidance, the red line boundary must include all land necessary to carry out the development, including access to the public highway. It's glaringly obvious that the access, which is the only matter sought for approval, includes this land to connect to the roundabout. This has not been done here, and to be procedurally valid, the application should have included all land necessary to carry the development out. The applicants clearly can't carry this development out without going over this piece of land. No ownership notice has been served on our clients, nor, if the land is claimed to be highway, on the Highways Authority. Either way, the red line location plan and ownership certificates and notices are defective. This omission raises serious doubts about the deliverability of the proposed northern access. The Highways Authority has suggested that access could be secured via Section 278 agreement under the Highways Act, as it is public highway. However, they have not recognised that our information is that while the Highway Authority is responsible for the road itself, the club retains responsibility for the adjoining grassed area and bank. A fence sits on top of the bank, and the club owns a thin piece of land to the front of it. According to our records, this small area is not Highways land. We've already provided the council with plans confirming this ownership position. Accordingly, any agreement allowing access through this land would require the explicit consent of our clients as landowners, consent which has neither been granted nor can be assumed, given the concerns that they have. If that northern access cannot be delivered, all vehicles will be forced to use the southern route via Newcourt Way and Old Ryden Lane. This scenario has not been assessed in the submitted transport assessment, nor considered by the Highways Authority, because it is assumed the northern access can be used. Officers have already stated that southern access is unacceptable. The committee has therefore not been presented with this scenario or consideration. The access arrangements, which is the key element of this application, and the submitted details have not been demonstrated to be suitable for the proposed development, or if more importantly, deliverable. This should therefore be considered further, or even considered as an additional reason for refusal. In summary, this application is procedurally defective, its access arrangements undeliverable, and it conflicts with both adopted and emerging policy. Specifically, the red line boundary is inaccurate, and the land and the ownership of our clients should be included in the submission. Ownership notices and certificates have not been properly served. The access arrangements cannot be demonstrated to be safe, suitable, or deliverable, and the proposal conflicts with the emerging policy EJ6 of the Exeter plan. Therefore, we respectfully request that members uphold the recommendation for refusal and include an additional reason relating to the procedural invalidity and the undeliverability of the northern access. Thank you for your time.
Thank you very much, Mr. Thomas. Members have questions now. Start with Councillor Mitchell.
Thank you, and so we might need the help of the highway team on this one, because clearly highway is a major bone of issue that you're raising with us. And in our supplementary information, I don't know whether you've seen this or had access to this as such, the Highways Authority or stating that an S276 allows power to be granted even where you've not got the ownership of the land in question, was quite clearly your argument is about the ownership of the land is not in the possession of the developer as such, and is highly unlikely to be. So what is your response to, if you've seen it, our supplementary?
Yes, I have seen that, and my clients did some checks on their own plans in the week, and according to their plans, there's clearly a very small slither of land around the fence, which abuts that area of land, which they say that they own. So there's a very tiny amount, and there's a very plans I sent. It's a very, like I say, very small slither, but it is in the ownership of our clients. So therefore, as part of the application, the red line should include access to the roundabout, because it's the integral part of the application. And they're applying for access, so there's an element here of procedurally, surely they should have included that within the submission itself, notwithstanding what the Highways Authority say. So you'd either have to serve notice on the Highways Authority, or you'd have to serve notice on our clients.
Hopefully during the next session, the Highways Officer will be able to respond on that particular point. On the other point that you raised, and also within the report, and again, you talk about the emerging extra plan and make reference to the emerging extra plan. What weight, in your opinion, does that carry? Because it's not yet a statutory document or even been inspected. So what weight should be given to that as distinct from the 2012-2013 plan, which might be at variance with the emerging plan?
Well, I think it clearly shows the direction of travel and the intentions for the site and other sites that are coming forward in Exeter. So whilst it hasn't got to that advanced stage yet, I think you can afford it some weight in terms of just showing what the considerations are for this, not just this site, but other sites in Exeter as well.
Councillor Ketchen.
If I got you right, you sort of mentioned that part of the objection was that, I think if I got you right, do correct me, that this is going to be part residential, and that because that didn't fit with the Exeter plan emerging and whatnot, it was meant to be employment land. That was one of the reasons you put forward as an objection. If it was all put forward as commercial land, would your objection be removed?
I think that the objection really does stem from the potential impact upon the roundabout, particularly on match days, that there is a big concern about traffic coming out of there, particularly say during the Saturday, and the implications that would have for the surrounding road network.
Is it not the case that if it's commercial land, it will have a similar impact because it'll either be used as parking or will have customers coming and going? I'm not quite sure I understand your objection.
Well, I think in either scenario, they're both going to attract vehicles to and from the site. So it's any additional vehicles coming up and down that road, potentially, that could cause an impact upon the access to Sandy Park, which is the cause of concern.
Thank you. Any members with any other questions for Mr. Thomas? No, again, thank you for your time, sir. Thank you. Our next speaker is James McMurdo from McMurdo Land and Planning Development, speaking as a supporter. Good evening, and you have your 5 minutes whenever you wish to start. Okay, and don't forget your microphone. Thank you.
Thank you. It's nice to see happy faces this evening. My name is James McMurdo. I'm a chartered surveyor. I'm a chartered town planner. I work from my own small practice, and I work for the applicant, who's also the landowner. We refer you to our letter to officers and members that we sent earlier today. This is a significant proposal for 158 houses and 180,000 square feet of employment space in a city that badly needs both. So 180,000 square foot of employment will deliver about 1,000 jobs at the expense of 2 trees that aren't TPOable. It requires more consideration than it has been afforded to date, and I think the last application that we sat through was a great case in point as to how an authority, if it wanted to, could deal with an applicant. We haven't been afforded the same courtesy at all, which is reflected in the letter that we sent to members and officers. In simple terms, there are significant issues with the recommendation to refuse. There are significant issues with the existing policy plan, which has been superseded by the construction of the hotel. There are significant issues with the emerging policy plan because it fails to take into account the scale and massing impacts of the hotel, and in particular its impact on allocated land. So all we're asking you to do really is 2 things: defer making a decision on this application, go to the site as a committee, stand near to the hotel and think about the emerging allocations, think about the impact of the hotel and what your policy aims to do. You want to deliver 7 hectares of employment land, and you want to deliver 357 houses. The only way you can do that is to take the hotel into account. So we're also asking you to further think about whether, in the context of 5-year land supply issues, a 3,000 house backlog in housing delivery, and significant issues with employment land delivery in the city and in the sub-region, we're also asking you to consider whether, in actual fact, 158 houses and 180,000 square foot of employment land could be construed as harmful. How can it be construed as harmful when it's needed? That's all it is. So we're asking you to do 2 things: go to the site as a committee, look at the impact of the hotel, and make your mind up on the emerging policy plan. And we're asking you to think about whether this development is truly harmful, because it can't be. Thank you very much, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. McMurdo. Right, I had Councillor Atkinson first.
Yeah, thank you. I am familiar with this site, and I've enjoyed going to the stadium there to watch rugby. I mean, looking at this site, would you not agree that it's an ideal site for economic purposes? You're close to the hotel, close to IKEA, and all of those things, rather than housing. And I ask you to consider, where do these people, in addition to all the other people that live in this new development, where do they go to work? You're proposing that they drive into Wamford and go through and create more air quality pollution in Wamford Hill to gain access to work wherever, or that they drive down there, go down to Topsham Road and work there. I mean, we do need to provide working economic areas so that new businesses can develop to provide work for the new houses. So I don't understand why you object to this site being developed for high value economic development purposes, and why you're insisting that it should be exclusively for housing in this location.
I'm not sure.
I don't understand why the economic development in this particular site.
But I'm not saying that. what I'm saying is that the existing policy plan is blank, which was picked up by Councillor Mitchell. And that allows members to make their mind up about the uses. The emerging policy is employment to the north and residential to the south. And it doesn't take into account the impact of the hotel, which is basically in the middle of the site. So what I'm saying is if you grade the uses from the hotel out the way, then you will deliver more employment land and more houses. So if you take this as an example, this is about 8 hectares of land. It's going to deliver 158 dwellings. It meets the residential density prescribed by the council, and it's going to deliver 180,000 square feet of commercial space. The land to the south is 11 hectares. So that's how you hit your policy, be taking into account the impact of the hotel. If you don't take into account the impact of the hotel, you can't hit the residential numbers that you will need. And then you need to find another site.
Councillor Kitchen and Councillor Mitchell.
Hi, can you just explain the hotel thing again? It's not hitting the mark with me about how it's changing the dynamic. That's my first question. Okay, and then the other question I'd like to ask, because when I was reading the paper, looking through it, I didn't get any sense that you're delivering the commercial space. It's just the footprint that will be left. You're not developing commercial space, because that's obviously bespoke to the business that comes forward. It's about outline planning for 158 homes, and then there's green space left for commercial users to come forward. And my sort of supplementary question, you don't have to ask a supplementary question, but we like to answer that, but we do like to ask them, because it's a bit of all sort of a game we play. The committees that we have has the owners of Sandy Park ever approached your client to develop the space or buy a piece of land?
The first part about the hotel was 8 stories high. So I think that's why I'm asking the committee to go to the site, stand near the hotel and feel the impact of the hotel. And then think about, would you like to live there when something's 8 stories next to you? And I think as reasonable people, you'll conclude that you don't, but that doesn't mean you can't get the level of development that you want, combining the two sites. All it means is you need to rejig it. So you put the employment land and you gradiate that away from the hotel. And the residential can take place. You'll get more dwellings than your policy requires that way. What was the next one?
You're not planning to build commercial stuff. It's just the house. It's an outline planning permission just for the houses, essentially, isn't it?
No, it isn't. It's outline planning permission for housing and commercial space. So the council can control the delivery and phasing of commercial space in line with the houses. That's in the council's gift. Did you ask me something else about the whether did you mean Exeter Rugby Club had asked their client whether they could develop the space? I don't know the answer to that. I will ask my client and I will let the committee know.
Thank you very much. We normally, we are now restricting to about 5 minutes the question and answers to the speaker. So Councillor Mitchell, can you be brief? Is that possible? Is it you next, yeah?
Just one question. You made reference in your opening remarks to the way the committee had worked with the previous applicant. We all know at the moment there is a crying need for housing developments to take place, because there is a housing need for not just Exeter but elsewhere, and also because of our lack of a 5-year land supply. What becomes clear to me in reading the documentation is that the local authority believe there are major issues regarding your application. Could you tell us what pre-application advice you took with this authority and how you've worked with the authority to get to the stage we are that you get a refusal?
With pleasure, I will tell you that. I've got emails from various officers, including 5 emails from Roger Clockworthy, telling me that he will come back to me at some later date and never did. We paid a pre-application fee. Officers refused to engage with us and that application fee was returned. And we're trying to deliver 1,000 jobs in 158 houses to help the council meet its residential targets and its commercial targets. So that's why I'm a bit angry to be sitting here with a recommendation of refusal.
Thank you. Members with any further questions? No, in that case, thank you, Mr. Miller, for your presentation. Thank you very much. Right, we now at this stage move on to the officer's presentation, please. This is Kurt, yeah? Well, you're speaking for Christopher.
Thank you, Chair. This is an outline planning application with all matters reserved except access for up to 158 dwellings and up to 17,567 square metres of commercial floor space with associated infrastructure on a site at Sandy Park Farm. The case officer is Christopher Cummings. Christopher can't be here tonight as he is on leave. I am Matt Diamond, the Assistant Service Lead, Major Projects, and presenting on his behalf this evening. This slide is the site location plan submitted with the application, site outlined in red, further land to the south of Old Ryden Lane to the south, also in the same ownership as the applicant. I think members will be familiar with the location adjacent to the Exeter Rugby Club Sandy Park Stadium. The site adjoins the railway line to the west and the A379 highway to the north. This is an aerial view of the site showing that the existing land use is agricultural, except for some existing properties in both residential and commercial use in this area here. This is a parameter plan that was submitted with the application. It shows mixed uses in grey colour and residential in the beige stroke brown colour, with areas of open space and green infrastructure in between, as well as a main access route through the middle of the site, connecting Sandy Parkway, I think it's called, and Old Ryden Lane. And this is the illustrative plan indicating how the site could be developed for this mix of uses that was submitted in support of the application, but is not before you to be determined this evening, being as it is an outline. This is the plan that was submitted showing the design of the internal spine road through the middle of the site. And this is the plan showing the proposed access onto Sandy Parkway to the north of the site, leading onto the A379. This is the plan showing the proposed access to the south onto Old Ryden Lane. And members will note from the officer's report an issue with 2 trees that the council's tree officer thinks are worthy of retention on Old Ryden Lane, which can be seen here, which would need to be removed as part of this application to facilitate that southern access. This is plan 1 from the core strategy, showing the new core strategic allocation area. Policy CP19 allocates this area for around 3,500 dwellings and 16 hectares employment land and supporting infrastructure. And the site is shown indicated in the top of the area. It also shows Old Ryden Lane as a green infrastructure route. Members will also note from the officer report there's reference to the New Court Master Plan that was approved for development management purposes in 2010. This provides guidance for the delivery of the proposed land uses in policy CP19 and shows this site as allocated for employment land only. I probably will just take the opportunity here to address just a couple of comments that were made earlier. When the application was submitted, there was a live application for residential on the land to the south of Old Ryden Lane by the same applicant. That had a resolution to approve dating back to 2015, but the section 106 was never signed, so that permission could not be issued. When the current application was submitted, we held a meeting with Mr. McMurdo and the applicant to discuss this proposal in the context of the existing application to the south that was extant at the time, and our consistent advice since then, since early last year, was that a overall master plan is required to show how the required quantum of employment land and housing could be delivered potentially across both of these sites. So the discussion did mention an idea of putting some of the employment on the site to the south instead of residential, due to the presence of the hotel that's been constructed. Our position is that that's potentially fine as long as there is a master plan to show that is deliverable, particularly in regard to access considerations. And the reason that this application was submitted in 2023 and it is only now that we bring it to planning committee is because despite the attempts to work with the applicants and encourage that master plan, we haven't been able to get anywhere with them to secure that master plan. We've just had a very indicative idea of putting some employment to the south, but not of the quantum we require, with no supporting evidence to demonstrate that that would be deliverable in terms of access in particular. And this is the key diagram from the Exeter plan. As you know, it's not adopted, but it has been submitted to be examined by the Secretary of State. The report states that a very limited weight could be given to it, and that's because it isn't adopted. So members need to be aware of that. But as you heard earlier, it does show the direction of travel. And I think since the core strategy was adopted back in 2012, obviously there's been a lot of development that's been delivered in New Court, primarily housing, which means that there's very limited land left to build anything. But what our local plans team has taken on board is the requirement for employment land to be delivered, which is why they are proposing to allocate this site for employment uses only. These are the key issues, summarising what's been taken from the Officers Committee report. So just to repeat, the New Court Urban Extension requires 16 hectares of employment land or thereabouts as part of core strategy policies CP19 and CP2. No employment land has been delivered so far. Obviously, IKEA has been built, but that is a retail use. And as I mentioned just now, only 3 land parcels remain. This proposal does provide some employment, but it only provides 2.29 hectares of employment land on a site that is around 8 hectares. So that doesn't meet the current policy requirements. Obviously, we are aware that we do not have a 5-year housing land supply, therefore the so-called tilted balance in the presumption in favour of sustainable development in the NPPF does apply to determining planning applications in the city at the present time. However, having considered this, we as officers believe that the weight afforded to employment land is stronger than the weight should be afforded to housing in this particular case. There are a number of other technical issues that have yet to be resolved. Given that they have not been resolved to date, they are there as additional reasons for refusal. We do anticipate if the applicant does appeal, there may be an opportunity to resolve those technical issues through the appeal process. However, because our overall reason for refusal is due to the lack of employment land, and we have an extension of time to determine the application, as requested by the applicant to the end of this month. That is why we are bringing it to you to be determined this evening. And the last few slides just set out the reasons for refusal as in the report. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. I invite questions. I'm start off with Councillor Mitchell and Councillor Ketchin.
I wonder, I've got some questions to Matt, but I'd also like to have the highway officer respond to the earlier statement and their statement in relation to access and the point made by the objector. So Ben can break his silence for 3 hours and contribute hopefully. But if I start with Matt's questions, first of all, although this is outline planning permission, we're not concerned about density, but what type of housing were they projecting to put on this? Was this 2-3 bedroom housing? Was it flats? Do we know what? It's just out of interest to know the type of housing they were, so the market they were looking for on the housing. In relation to the master plan for the area, you outlined to us there was a ratio between different styles of development taking place on the site, and you showed us an illustrated map color coded. To what extent has that plan been delivered according to that original colouring? Because there was talk about earlier on moving things around, jigsaw puzzle, you don't have to have it, doesn't have to be employed, that could be housing, could move a bit there. And what I'm not clear about, as the bulk of the site has already been developed, has it been developed according to the master plan, or has there been more housing, less employment in other areas, or has it been fully meeting the original requirements, so this becomes the only land that is now available for employment use?
Yeah, thank you, Councillor. So, as you know, this is an outline application, so the type of housing isn't specified, and that would be subject to later reserve matters if this application was approved. There was an indicative layout plan submitted, and I would imagine it was indicating primarily standard 2-storey house types. In terms of the second question, I wasn't quite sure whether you were talking about the new core master plan as a whole.
The new core master plan as a whole indicated quite clearly the pink bit.
I'd say broadly, I would say that the in terms of the brown areas, in terms of delivery of housing, that's broadly in alignment. Obviously, we all know that the IKEA store was granted permission several years ago, which was on the area indicated generally as G, which was initially indicated as housing as well on this master plan. And we've obviously heard about the hotel that was again granted a few years ago. That was on the small triangular area just to the south of Old Ryden Lane, indicated by the red dashed arrow, just below the pink area, which is where obviously the Sandy Park complex is located. So obviously there were variations in the past for those proposals judged on their merits, where the master plan was taken into account. Generally speaking, though, housing is what's been delivered elsewhere. And as I said, so far, no, we might deem traditional employment land anywhere.
So therefore, the only site available for the employment land is what we've already originally allocated, which is subject to this application.
Yes, as well as the land indicated also in purple with the Y letter, those two.
Good evening and thank you for the questions. Just quickly, I think it's important to point out that in Section 278 of the Highways Act, it is an agreement between any person and the Highway Authority. Now, highway maintainable at public expense or HMPE isn't just the carriageway, it does include vergeways as well. Obviously, the speaker this evening has mentioned about a slither of land that is within the ownership of his client. I received that on Friday, so I haven't had the opportunity to fully investigate that to see the impact between where HMPE and the red line of this application comes in. However, it's my understanding there's a couple of options that can be considered, whether that's going through a resolution to grant to look at it at a later date, or potentially even, obviously, as we mentioned this evening, deferring to investigate that fully.
To clarify, where there is a third-party ownership of a piece of land that is required, we've seen this on bigger sites before, there still has to be agreement between both parties before it can proceed. There's no way of compulsory purchase or someone taking over someone else's piece of land without their agreement.
Sorry, could you say that again?
What you're saying here is there's third-party land might be involved in order for the highways to proceed, right? You can grant permission for that to take place. What I was asking, can it legally take place unless there's agreement between the developer and the owner of the land to transfer that land?
No.
Basically, the answer is no, that we can grant planning permission even if the applicant doesn't control all the land, but it still be requirement to seek agreement with the landowner to enable the access to be created, if the access is deemed to be necessary. So the basic answer is that if as what the speaker said was true, and I'm not saying it is or it isn't, there could well be a ransom situation there that would only be resolved through legal agreement. I don't think in this situation the council would have going to enact its powers for compulsory purchase. There have to be an incredibly powerful reason for us to consider that.
Just looking at my list here, I Councillor Ketchin next, then Councillor Atkinson.
Just as an aside, but while your slide's up there, it looks like to me there's a road ahead butting the red line. It's an obvious point of access should that be chosen, so issue solved. But anyway, my two questions are not for Ben, so he can rest assured it's not his spotlight. One's item of process, one's a sort of technical. Just quickly, the density proposed is 55 units of housing per hectare where residential properties proposed. I'd just like to know if that's high density, medium density, or low density, because it's a greenfield site and getting the best out of it. Another one is a issue of process. The applicant has asked that this probably be deferred, I think, is the mood music I'm sensing. But if it was refused, what would be the difference for the applicant? Because either way, we wouldn't be agreeing it tonight. And I think Matt mentioned, I've got the feeling there's a time limit on this, so I just need that explained before I make my decision. So one's density and one's process. Is that okay, Matt?
Sure. I would say that 55 dwellings per hectare isn't high density, particularly as you might expect in a more central urban location. It is probably middle of the road, I would say. A lower density would be 20, 30 hectares, sorry, dwellings per hectare. In terms of process, yes, we obviously back in July when we wanted to bring this application to a head because it had been in the system for well over a year. We offered the applicant, we asked for an extension time, they requested to the end of November, so that's what we've given. We don't want to extend it any further, to be honest with you. So if you deferred it, I think the request was to be able to see the hotel. Although I think probably quite a few of you will probably be already familiar with the hotel. And I think that is talking about also the land to the south, which isn't up for your consideration this evening. And it also goes into the local plan issues as well, because I think the request is that the local plan should be amended and allocate the land north of Old Ryder Lane, subject to this application, for a mix of residential employment, as well as the land to the south as a mix of residential employment. The problem is we can't do that because we don't have a master plan that's looking at the access issues, etc., to demonstrate that that is deliverable. So if you refuse it this evening, as recommended by officers, the applicants will be able to appeal. They'll have up to 6 months to appeal the decision if they so wish. I think that's.
I think also the question was about whether if we could they appeal without the reverse of non-determination because we're out of time. So there's no difference. Is that?
Yes, when we go beyond the agreed extension of time, the applicants have the choice of appealing if they so wish.
Only to answer your question, that so refusing tonight, that could trigger an appeal. A deferral could also trigger appeal for non-determination because we're out of time. Yeah, and kind of, but that would all depend then on the applicant.
Right, so I've got Councillor Atkinson, then Councillor Manyard, and then Councillor Oxley.
Yeah, thank you. This is a question for Matt. If I could go to the slide where you've got the original master plan. And what I'm trying to understand is what role this developer has played. Because you mentioned that they were given planning permission for a housing development on another part of the site. Can you point out which part of the site that was? Was it that hatch, the white and beige hatch site? Which was the site they were previously given?
So they weren't granted planning permission.
No. Okay.
They submitted a planning application in 2014 for housing on this land here, shaded brown to the south of the current application site. That received a resolution to approve, subject to basically agreeing a Section 106 legal agreement back in 2015. The 106 was drafted and sent to the applicant's solicitors, but we didn't hear anything back. So that we've disposed of that application now because it was so old and would require a complete reassessment, starting from scratch, if you will.
So what I'm understanding then is both the land F and Z are in the ownership of this developer. And what you're asking for is a master plan across those two portions, or are you asking for a master plan across wider areas? Where would this master plan extend to? I'm trying to understand what they control and what this master plan would actually involve. Obviously, it's got to involve setting some aside for commercial development, but clearly, is what we've seen is an application where they're quite aggrieved, but I'm trying to understand what is within their control and what they're refusing to do to enable us to facilitate a consideration of planning issues.
So their position is obviously we require all of this site to be delivered for employment, and this application only proposals a small area for employment, and the rest is housing. And they have mentioned delivering the residual employment on their land to the south. What we've said is, well, for us to accept that, there needs to be an assessment done through a master plan for both these parcels of land that looks at the quantum of development, say to the north, quantum of that combined impact on the highways and access in that area, take out the stadium and so on, to ensure that that is deliverable. And if we, through that master planning process, which we've said numerous times, we are willing to work with them. Obviously, we encouraged submitting a pre-app. They did, but it wasn't for the master plan we were expecting. Hence why we returned it. You know, as long as it shows the quantum that we require, then then we can be flexible. But because that work hasn't been carried out, we can't guarantee that the required amount of employment will be delivered.
Councillor Banyard.
I actually think my question's been addressed. It was really about what the implications of deferring this are. I still don't quite understand. I wonder, could it be explained really much more simply for me about what would happen if we deferred this decision compared to rejected, just for my understanding, please?
Yeah, so in either scenario, it would be up to the applicant, but there's an opportunity to appeal either for refusal. So if the committee chose to go with the officer recommendation, refuse outline plan submission this evening, they could appeal that refusal. Alternatively, if the committee chose to defer a decision for a site visit or any other reason, the time that would take to organise a site visit would take us beyond the current extension of time, so the applicant could also choose to appeal for non-determination. But it would be the applicant's choice either way.
Thank you, Councillor Banyard. Councillor Ralston.
Thank you, Chair. My questions go back to the highway issues again. My understanding is that there are already mitigations in place for match days at Sandy Park to help with the flow of people, and having been a volunteer at the recent Women's World Cup and been one of those people that was trying to herd cats in the car park, I can completely understand why. Can you just explain a little bit more about the reasons why it fails to demonstrate that safe access, just so that's sort of clear? And I'd also like to take this opportunity to point out that the men's team play on a Saturday, but the women's often play on a Sunday. So there's, in people's heads, there's probably twice as many matches that happen. And although as yet the crowds aren't as big for the women's, I do believe that Sandy Park's ambitions are that they will be. So it's a significant amount of vehicles and bodies to move around. So I'm assuming that's around those issues, but maybe you could just explain a bit more.
So this this access to the south where Chris, the case officer, has reckoned a reason for years as well, partly because of the loss of the trees, questioning whether the access has to be in that position and whether the trees could be retained. Also, from my understanding, because it's not demonstrating how the potential conflict with vehicles entering that access with the number of pedestrians on match days that are obviously using that green infrastructure route. So that interaction at the junction probably requires a redesign, a rethink of this access point to show how that can be done safely. So I think that's what Chris is talking about. I think it's probably resolvable, but we've not had any revised plans to date, so that's why that reason is still there.
I'm sorry, thank you. The committee is in session, thank you.
Can I ask a
No.
supplementary question, please, Chair?
Councillor Rolls.
Thank you. Given the discussion that we've just heard about the potential or unknown issues with the ownership at the top end, this might not be a question for you, probably be possibly for the officers. If we were minded to go against the officers' recommendations and grant, and then it turned out that there was an issue with that top end, would that mean that the only access would then be in and out of the bottom, or would it be a condition of, do you understand what I'm getting at?
I think if members wanted to approve the application, we would recommend you to defer it so that we could come back with a comprehensive package of conditions and planning obligations to consider that situation. So we might have a condition that won't allow only access to the south. It would have to be to the north as well. But obviously we're recommending refusal because of the overall policy issue of lack of employment land. So that's why it's not really an issue.
Again, I do really want to go on to the debate, but Councillor Pole, you have a question of the officer?
Yeah, my question was just about looking at the two sites as a whole, then to what extent does this, I think, did you say it was that the site marked Z was 8 hectares and that their current proposal is to deliver 2.2 or something of those hectares as employment land? So I just wonder, because I think the sort of the sort of goal, since this is allocated land in local plans, is to get moving on delivering everything. So yeah, I mean, that is my understanding, is that wouldn't be, if you took the site as a whole, then proportionately you'd be sort of under the amount of, below the amount of employment land as a ratio of the whole. Does that, is my understanding sort of correct on that?
So again, refer you to the officer's report. So the adopted plan at the moment, the core strategy, allocates the whole of the new core area for around 16 hectares of employment land, but none has been delivered. So on that basis, as well as the guidance from the master plan indicating that this land should be employment land, that's essentially why we are recommending refusal. Again, it's not adopted policy yet, so only very limited weight could be put on it, but the emerging policy in the Exeter plan, which is EJ6, allocates the site for 7 hectares of employment land, and this proposal was 2.2
something I need to look up. And again, I'd like to remind members that we need to be focusing on the application in front of you and not considering possibles and ifs and maybes. There hasn't been a master plan submitted in order to show how that redistribution could happen. So we are looking at this application in front of us, which is for the houses and that amount of employment land as it stands. Have we completed questions to the officer on the presentation? Right, thank you. In that case, members, I would like to move into debate. Anybody want to start us off? Councillor Mitchell, then Councillor Kett.
Thank you, Chair. Having read the officer's report and gone through the report, I think there's a logic in their recommendation. I think you can see the way the planning team have operated and arrived at the decision they've arrived at. I have the difficulty that I realise that this land is allocated for development. Whatever we do this evening, this land at some stage will be developed. It's not like dealing with a traditional greenfield site. My own view is, in the light of what the applicant has said, or his representative has said, and even in the light of the concerns of the director, I feel there is room to get agreement on a future extension to allow this committee to review this, to do a site visit and review this application, because my grave concern on this matter is, and it's already been raised by the director in effect, a straightforward refusal at this stage by land this going straight to an appeal where it is outside our control. And I'm sure the developer wishes to work with us as an authority to get what is right for the site. And I think once we've done a site visit and talked to them, it might be that this application is withdrawn, is refined, a fresh application, the master plan might appear so we can proceed, but at least we remain in control of the situation. My worry with a blanket refusal at this stage, we're almost forcing the developer to go to appeal, and I'm concerned about that. I don't think we've necessarily got the right answer yet from either the developer or our planning team, but I think as members, once we've done a site inspection, spoken and come back and reviewed the situation, and the developers had a chance to review the situation, I think we could stay in control of the situation. Thank you.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. Councillor Ketchett.
I don't feel I need to do a site visit to know the issues. What I feel sad about is there seems to be some bad blood between two neighbours, and found the first presenter quite disingenuous about the access, for which there is clearly access on a road head to the right of the roundabout. So I think I can't quite understand why the sort of attempt to put a spanner in the works today on that. The applicant, this will get developed, this area will get developed, and I think it's about people working together. Whether the applicant chooses to go to appeal, that's their choice. But this land is up for development under the Exeter plan. The council's not resisting that. The council's not saying you just need to work with us. We don't like the way you're working with us. Here's a way forward. I think at appeal that will look very good, actually. So I uphold the officer's view, not because I want to be difficult for the developer. We need the development, but there's a way of going about things, and I think the council have been reasonable. I do hear some of the issues that are perceived to have happened, but I think I just want to point out I'm not so impressed with the neighbours at Sandy Park tonight.
Thank you. Councillor Atkinson.
Oh, thank you. Yes, I agree with Councillor Ketchum on this, which you may be surprised, but you know, it's always a first. I mean, I tried to get to the bottom of how the developer had worked with our planning officers, and to be honest, I wasn't satisfied that they'd gone as far as they could to make it easy for us to make this application. There are too many answered questions. I mean, access, I mean, surely in the application, they should have, the ownership issue should have been dealt with at that stage. And now at this late stage, it's all up for grabs, for instance. And, you know, there's too many highways safety issues that have not been dealt with. And you know what, as Councillor Ketchley said, this land is going to be developed. We want it to be developed in a way that is beneficial for the whole of Exeter, its economic, commercial activities, as well as its housing activity. And what I would say is to the developer, go away, come up with this master plan, make it easy for us to agree to it. At the moment, I can't agree to this. There's too many unknown unknowns, if you like, about what we can agree and what risks we can take with safety, etc. For me to do this, really, I do agree that the grounds given here justify refusal, and I disagree that, for the reasons said, that what we need is a fresh start. If they go and appeal against our refusal, that's up to them. I think they're wasting everybody's time. Get your head down, come up with this master plan, sort it out with the planners, sort it out with the Highways Authority, sort it out with Sandy Park, so we can actually make a decision.
Mr. McMurdo, will you please refrain from comment? Oh, sorry. Oh, right. Okay. In that, again, we cannot have comments from the floor. Thank you. Councillor Williams, please.
Thank you, Chair. I look at this and I'm a bit dismayed because I'm being asked to make a decision based on very little information. And ordinarily, you look at things like highways, you look at things like flooding, you look at things like that, and there's so many things that may or weren't forthcoming, or things that will have to be established. And what's even more frustrating is that I have absolutely no doubt that there's a very, very good scheme on both of those sites. And what I think is interesting, I've been listening to other colleagues, actually, Councillor Mitchell's point about planning control being in our power. I think that is a very interesting point. And I guess my unhelpful contribution to the debate is I'm not really sure how to proceed, because I can see that the applicant feels, very strongly that this ought to go ahead. There are some very strong policy reasons that I'm loath to go against what the officers have said, and I don't think I will do, because I think the policy things do carry considerable weight. But my sort of frustration is that it's come to us in a state that I'm almost having to do something that I shouldn't, which is kind of fill in blanks. And that I find incredibly frustrating. So to what I'll do, I shall listen to what others are going to do and maybe take a best on that. But I guess my dismay is to be minuted. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Any other comments from members? Councillor Pole.
Yeah, I'm just a little concerned about the history with a previous application having not progressed, and with this site being master planned for employment and not coming forward with an adequate ratio of employment land. So yeah, so I agree that I think I would like to see this. I'd like to feel more confident, that we're going to actually see both the employment land and the housing that are master planned there to be coming forward and delivered. And this particular application and the way it's been sort of conducted, I think is not giving me that confidence. So I'd like to have more confidence with a sort of a more balanced proposal.
Thank you, Councillor Paul. As far as I'm concerned, looking at the request for a site visit, I really don't see any grounds under the regulations relating to a site visit. We are familiar with the site, and going to a different site and looking at the hotel is not really relevant to this application. I'm always loath to look at refusal because of the risk of appeal and the appeal being granted. We know from other sites that when an unsuitable access arrangement is forced on us by somebody else, that can result in problems. But I really do see so many problems with this application that I can't do anything other than personally support the officers, and that's what I shall be doing in this case. Do any other members have contributions to the debate, please? In that case, I move to the director for a summing up.
Thank you, Chair. So I'll be brief because it's late and you've all worked hard this evening. We've heard a lot on this item about process, and I'm concerned about, particularly about Councillor Williams, feeling like you're not fully understanding the issues. Actually, from an officer point of view, that it is quite simple. The key issue and why we're recommending refusal is that this proposal would not deliver enough employment land. And so by approving the application, that opportunity to provide the right amount of employment land would be lost. And just like to remember as well, employment, as is detailed in the report, is a key issue for the upcoming local plan examination. So amongst the balance of factors that you need to consider is that so far in this whole area of Newcourt, no employment land has been delivered to date. And there's relatively little land left. There's 2 plots in the current applicant's ownership and another plot. There's 3 plots left, majority of which is in the ownership of the applicant. That's all we've got left to deliver the right amount of employment land. So that is really the issue. That there's other concerns about transport, movement, access, but that's the fundamental issue that the site, which is why we believe the application should be refused.
Thank you, Director. We are at the stage where I'm considering proposing the motion. Is there an inclination to amend the motion, or yes, Councillor Mitchell? Well, I'm going to, yeah, that's what I was saying. Effectively, I am moving the recommendation, and that's why I was looking to it. It's been seconded by Councillor Atkinson. Councillor Mitchell, the floor is yours.
My amendment would be, subject to a further agreed extension, we defer this application to allow for further negotiations between the applicant and the City Council.
Thank you to Councillor Mitchell. Do we have a seconder for that amendment?
Yeah.
I have a seconder for Councillor Banyard. Would anybody like to speak for the amendment?
Briefly, to go to the point that Councillor Williams said, my concern is about loss of control by us as an authority over this land, that a blanket refusal might bring upon us tonight by leading the applicant. Therefore, I think the only route they've got in order to seek any development is through an appeals procedure, of which we've only got limited control through the input of our reports and our officers' advice. By the applicant, I believe, has got to a stage where they see refusal hitting the buffers in regard to their situation. They are willing, from my understanding, they wanted us to do a site visit, they wanted us to defer, etc. So clearly there's a willingness on the point of the applicant. I believe following tonight's lengthy discussion and the points raised by our planning team to us as members, we're in a better position to understand the nature of the issues on this site. And I think the developer should be given that opportunity to have one more set of negotiations with our planning team to see if we can come up with something that's acceptable to this committee.
Thank you, Councillor Atkinson.
I wanted to speak against the amendment because I think they've been given enough time. It's several years, actually, isn't it, so far? I mean, how long do we want? I mean, these are supposed to be dealt with within a couple of weeks, you know, planning applications. And so they've had that time. And I don't believe a deferring will do any good. It's send the wrong message that somehow we think this is a sound application. All it needs is tinkering on the edges, a bit more economic development. We're very clear this site should all be for economic development, as is currently in the master plan and in our plan, and therefore it's going to send out entirely wrong message to the developer, and they should, you know, recognise that. And then I do believe that it's dealt with by the inspector. We've got good grounds, which the officer is saying, for holding out our position, because we've got how many thousands of houses in this area? You will know, 2,005. I don't know how many. What is it? And no employment land. I mean, you know, people need to live, but they need to earn a living, and that's what we need to ensure for Exeter, the ability to do that. Thank you.
Councillor Banyard, you seconded the amendment. Would you like to speak? Or you okay?
Only that I agree with what Councillor Mitchell says. I think an agreed extension to this would be a desirable outcome to test their willingness to work productively with the council, and again would keep us more in control of the situation. So.
Thank you. Does anybody else wish to speak? Councillor Ralston.
Very briefly, because I know it's late, but I think the director has made it very clear the reasons for refusal on this is because of that balance of employment land, and I don't feel that the representative showed inclination that they were minded to increase that in any way. So I think that an extension isn't actually going to change for this parcel of land, which is what we are making a decision on. It won't change. An extension won't change that fundamental issue, which is this land that is allocated for employment solely.
Thank you, Councillor Ralston. I think the time has come for us to vote on the amendment. So what we are voting for is the amendment as proposed by Councillor Mitchell and seconded by Councillor Banyard. Would you care to read it out again to us?
Subject to a future agreed extension, we defer this application to allow for further negotiations between the applicant and the City Council.
Thank you, Councillor Mitchell. All those in favour of that amendment, please indicate.
2 in favour.
All those against the amendment, please indicate.
7 against.
Any abstentions, please?
And 1 abstention. Those amendments have not been carried.
So the amendment falls. We now move to the principal motion. The motion is, as indicated before, to follow the officer's recommendation for refusal. So this is to vote to refuse the application. I need a seconder for that, please. Councillor Ketchin. Thank you. With that in mind, can I please have an indication of those who are voting for refusal?
Eight in favour of refusal.
8, and those voting against the motion? And abstentions?
2 abstentions. So those have been carried.
Right, so the motion has been carried and that application has been refused. Members of the committee, I thank you for your time and attention this evening. Our next meeting is due for the 1st of December. The 1st of December, Councillor Kitchen. No, it is an extra meeting because there has been a backlog of applications that have not come to us. We've had to cancel meetings, and now, of course, we have to put in an extra meeting in order to deal with the business. 1st of December.